ever going to start this podcast you've been talking about for like forever?
Do you think that anyone will actually want to listen to something like this?
What is your plan for an introduction?
Are you sure you want to talk about these topics? People usually disagree.
3 hours? Are you crazy?
Do you think you're some kind of expert or something?
Are you planning to have an intro song?
What if a bunch of people get really mad and hate you over this?
Do you even know how to make a podcast?
Are you just doing this because you like to argue with people?
Don't let this be just one more thing that you talk about doing, but never actually do.
Wouldn't it be better to do just one episode for each topic?
Stop trying to change people's opinions. Just live your own life.
Dude, people are never going to agree. Just let it go.
Is this going to be a long intro? Because if it is, I'm bored already.
Welcome back, and a very happy Valentine's Day to you. I hope that you remember to spend some quality time with your significant other today. And I bet what they want more than anything is to listen to this episode with you. So what you should do right now is click pause, go find that person you love so much, free them from whatever boring activity they are currently involved in, and have them come and sit down next to you. Tell them that you're going to give them the greatest Valentine's gift that they have ever been given. Then click play, and watch as their face lights up with the love and adoration that you have only hoped for all the previous Valentine's days before this. And then at some point after this amazing experience is over, you can send me an email, or a text if we are close enough friends that you have my number, and thank me for all that I have done for your relationship. And I will say, you are welcome. My guest today is Ian Bond. Ian is the only reason I am able to do any of these podcasts remotely because he allows me to use his Zoom account, which is a pretty awesome thing to do. I first met Ian probably 6 or 7 years ago when my family started attending a new church. I wasn't excited to meet him at first, because to be honest, he looked a little scary and intimidating because he has one of the manliest beards I have ever seen. You see, at the time I had been attempting my own manly beard, and I thought I was doing a pretty decent job. Until I saw Ian. I was scared to stand near him because he made my beard seem insignificant. He made me feel like I wasn't good enough, not manly enough. I felt that people would think, wow, look at that manliest of manly men. And what is that standing next to him? Is that a manly man wannabe? Is that a woman? In fact, I shaved my beard off shortly after meeting Ian because I just couldn't hang. I realized that I had been bested. I can admit when I have been defeated. I know this is an audio-only podcast, and all you can hear is Ian's voice. So as you listen to his voice, I want you to picture him having an extremely intimidating beard. The manliest beard you have ever seen. Grizzly Adams, ZZ Top, and the Duck Dynasty guys have got nothing on this beard. You get the picture. However, what I did learn after getting to know him is that even though he looks scary at first, he is one of the nicest guys you will ever meet, and has some pretty amazing life stories, some of which he shares in today's episode. Topics discussed today are Don McLean, Paul McCartney and Wings, Kiss, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, the Beatles, The Who, why Sammy Hagar is better than David Lee Roth, Guns N' Roses, For King and Country, Lauren Daigle, Metallica, Pink Floyd, the Beastie Boys, Iron Maiden, Twisted Sister, Christian music, military service, small government, freedom of speech, abortion, freedom of religion, majority rule, January 6th, media lies, gun control, Bud Light, Dylan Mulvaney, men having babies, Elon Musk, defining the mission field, detoxing from alcohol, Calvinism, evangelism, and being used by the Lord. I hope that you will learn cool things by listening to our discussion. By the way, at one point Ian mentions a band that he had first looked up after hearing Danny and I talk about them in episode 9. I found out later that the band he was referring to was 21 Pilots. Enjoy the conversation. Well, it probably feels good right now where you're at. I mean, what's the weather been like in Idaho?
It's in the 20s.
Woo! See?
It's in the 20, let's look here.
Dang,
this
dude.
morning it is, 31.
Oh, nice and toasty, man. You better put on that Speedo and get outside in the swimming pool.
Yeah. Little JP Sears out there. No, it's this year's been kind of weird compared to the others. It's been last year. it seemed like spring lasted just a little longer. So it stayed cooler longer into the summer. But then when it got hot, it gets hot, man. I mean, 100 degrees. If you're in the high 80s, it's a pleasant day. And then it stayed that way for, 3 months last year, and it was miserable.
Is that pretty standard for the summer?
No, this year it got hot sooner. So spring was shorter. Spring came sooner. It was a little shorter. Then we got into the hot weather, but it cooled down sooner. The downside is that everybody like me that went to plant a garden based on local knowledge, our gardens didn't do very good. Because they're like, hey, when you see the snow clear off that peak up there, plant your garden. But don't plant it before that because you can get frost. And so everybody's just sort of meticulously watches. Then I've talked to other people that are like, I never pay attention to that. And they had like bumper crops of stuff. Whatever, man. But we went from having a garden in the ground last year to planter boxes this year, and I was kind of in a hurry, and I don't know if I got enough soil in them, and I don't know. It's all very technical. Mumbo jumbo.
So all right, man, we'll jump in. I start with music. Music's a fun one. I know you and I have talked briefly about this stuff before, and I know some of your musical tastes, but not all. I know Milli Vanilli's a big favorite of yours, but other than that, we'll have to talk about that in a bit. But first, I want to talk about your earliest musical memory, basically. What I mean by that is like the first time that you ever remember thinking to yourself, "This is awesome. I got to get more of this. This is the greatest song, greatest band, whatever."
I just kind of want to say this before. I've listened to the episodes, like Mayberry's and Danny's and some of the others. And music, the topic of music, this is the one that I have the most anxiety about.
Okay. I had one of the guests say the same thing. How funny.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why. If you were to ask me, and but let me go back to my earliest memory of like heard a song, said this is amazing, was Don Klein, American Pie.
Okay.
On the radio in like 1973 or 4.
I was -5.
Yeah, so I was like 4 or 5 years old, and we were leaving my uncle's house from a New Year's Eve party, and we were driving in my parents' station wagon, and it came on the radio. It was probably only 9 o'clock at night, but it seemed like midnight. It might have been midnight at that point. This was the 70s, so yeah. And I just remember, hearing the full American Pie song. I remember that like it was yesterday.
Okay.
But I also remember Wings was another band. Paul McCartney. So he was fresh out of the Beatles.
Yeah.
But it was the I forget the song.
Band on the Run.
Band on the Run.
Okay.
And I'm like, dude, I mean, he was good, but I later listened to a lot of Beatles songs. So like by later, I mean like 1976, 77. I had gotten Hard Day's Night, and everything was on vinyl. My mom had everything was on vinyl, obviously. And so Band on the Run. But, as a kid, we listened to everything from Johnny Horton. My mom had like a lot of Rolling Stones. She had the black,
Paint It Black.
Paint It Black. And then Donovan was another one. So a lot of that contemporary music of the day was all on like vinyl. So I listened to that. but Johnny Horton. But then like my dad, he was very into like what we would consider now classic country.
Okay.
You know, like Johnny Cash, but they were all contemporary at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that, what I would call now the, you know, true classic country music. So that would be like your Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings.
Right.
And it wasn't until probably with one caveat, when I was in second grade or first grade, I forget, a kid down the street, we were friends. His name was Chris Wolf, and he was a cool kid. He was the cool kid that lived down the block, and I'd go down to his house, and he had a Kiss poster on his wall.
Oh, nice.
This is like when Kiss just came out.
Nice.
And it was the classic Kiss poster, you know, with the four of them.
Yeah.
And the
and
original
full makeup and the whole
full
deal.
makeup. This was way before any of the, you know, the sellout years, I call them. But yeah, he was very into Kiss. I listened to Kiss when I was around him, but I never really attached to him. I was more into the folk music, you know, of course, the Stones, the Beatles, those types of things. But then some years later, like in sixth grade,
mm-hmm.
So this would have been in 78, 79, and then 80 was the magic year.
Okay.
Because that's when Back in Black came out.
Ooh, yeah.
So it was, what is this? And then that's the time that I was introduced to that AC/DC.
Right.
That was my first reference of AC/DC was Back in Black.
That was the first album with Brian Johnson, right?
That was Brian Johnson's debut.
Okay.
And just after Bon Scott had passed away.
Right.
They hire Brian Johnson. He comes in, they do Back in Black, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, then I started getting introduced to like the Cars.
Oh, nice. Love the Cars.
Stray Cats.
Mm-hmm.
Junior high years. So the Clash.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Aerosmith was always in there too.
Right.
Dude, Aerosmith is, anyway, they're cool, man. I like Aerosmith.
Well, they're one of those few bands, right, that's still kicking today and still writing good stuff, you know?
Yeah, they're
since like the 70s.
They're Aerosmith, right? I look at bands, but like, and then Van Halen was there, but I was never really into, and then, of course, now you go the whole other genre.
Mm-hmm.
In the metal, yes, you have the rock, the hard rock, you know, like AC/DC,
right?
But then it's like, ooh, now you've got Black Sabbath,
mm-hmm.
And I had never heard Ozzy Osbourne before, but I knew who Black Sabbath was. So my reference back to them was with Ozzy Osbourne was Black Sabbath.
Okay,
I like Black Sabbath. I like, you know, War Pigs, all of it. I'm like, I love this stuff. But I didn't really get into Ozzy's solo stuff.
Oh, okay.
With Randy Rhoads and stuff. I'm like,
yeah,
nothing against it. I just didn't connect with it. I was more of a
no Crazy Train for Ian, huh?
I don't mind it, or you know, Mother, I'm Coming Home, or whatever that song's name is. As a matter of fact, I heard that on the radio the other day. I'm like, this is a jam, man.
Yeah,
he sang with Lita Ford. And I'm like, cool, man. This is great.
Close My Eyes Forever. Yeah, that's a great
song. And I just think it's funny because you have Lita singing, who's, you know, a force in her own right. Yeah. But then Ozzy comes in, it's just like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, dude, this guy's, you know, I think he can sing pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a song that to this day, I get chills every time I hear it. Just because it's the lyrics are haunting and just the vocals in it are so awesome from both sides. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a great song.
Right. And so I had a very eclectic sort of and still to this day. And this is why I think the topic of music, especially surrounded like, what's your favorite? It's like, oh, dude, I feel obligated in some weird way to like, I gotta come up with the right answer. And I'm like, I can't.
Well, that's the beauty though of music, is that there is no right answer, right? Because I could say, this is my favorite band of all time. And you could say, Ryan, that's the worst band I've ever heard. That sucks. And we're both right.
But
you know what I mean?
Danny and you were talking about a band on his episode, and I actually went and looked them up, and I'm like, dude, they're good, man.
Oh, who was it?
I forget.
Oh, you can't.
But they were really good. No, and and I think I even had like texted. Anyway, they were good, man. They were a Christian band, I think, but they were very good.
As soon as you remember who that is, text me, because I have to know which band you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I will.
Okay.
But I did look them up, and I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. But I think for me, like I'm a in a lot of ways, I'm a purist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Ozzy Osbourne thing.
Right.
It's like, for instance, if I meet somebody for the first time and they introduce themselves as James, their name is James, or, William.
Like forever.
Regardless of,
they're never Jimmy.
For me, I'm like, well, except for Jimmy, my friend Jim. Everybody else calls him James, and
Oh, really?
Like,
okay.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, Jim, and it's kind of this thing. But no, I'm more of a. This is what they told me, and I'm going to respect that. And hey, you're William. I'm not going to take it upon myself. I don't know you well enough, number one, to say, hey, Billy. But I kind of feel that.
What if it was like James P. Butterworth III or something? Would you feel the need to say that, to call them that?
No, I don't know that I could take that. I'd probably have to have a conversation with them about their preferred. Can I call you Jim?
Yeah, you'd show them the Bitly account so they can shrink their name down a little bit.
Bitly. But no, and I think so. What I'm getting at is, though, for going back to Ozzy Osbourne, for instance, I like Black Sabbath with Ozzy Osbourne.
More than his solo stuff is what you're saying.
If you were to mention Ozzy Osbourne, I'm not going to think of his solo. I'm going to think of Black Sabbath.
Okay.
I'm going to think, the early years of Black Sabbath.
Right.
But that being said, if somebody was to come over with, Blizzard of Oz or whatever it is, I'll listen to it. I don't have an issue listening to it. It's just not my go-to. And it's kind of weird because the Beatles are the same way for me. Like, I love the Beatles.
Well, let's talk about the Beatles for a second, because you mentioned them before. I'm a huge fan also, but I mean, there's what they were together, 4 years, 5 years, something like that.
Not long.
They put out all these, and not only did they put out so much music, but it's so different. Like, you got the boy band days of, She Loves You, yeah, and then you get into Sgt. Pepper and the White Album and some of these just like amazing like psychedelic rock songs and that kind of a deal. So where do you go with the Beatles? Do you have a specific era that you prefer?
Like today, like if I was going to say, hey, I want to listen to some Beatles, it would be the White Album.
Okay. That's your favorite one, hands down?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, it's my favorite overall. Like, I could listen to all the songs on that album and be satisfied. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band is great.
Yeah.
But Hard Day's Night is good too.
Yeah, they're all great. They're all fantastic.
Yeah, it's a different mood, right? Because you have like Norwegian Wood, you have all of these like blah blah sappy sort of girls eating them up. That's what made them such a sensation, was Hard Day's Night, and
and to this day, that movie is still hilarious.
Yeah.
The movie Hard Day's Night. It's so funny. John cracks me up in that one. So the White Album is definitely one of my favorites, but ironically, maybe ironically it's the wrong word to use there, but it also has two of what I think are the stupidest Beatles songs of all time. I can't even listen to it. And a lot of people disagree with me on this because they love these songs, but one of them is Birthday, which has got to be the stupid today's your birthday. It's like, what a stupid song.
Yeah.
And then the other one is Back in the USSR, which I know a lot of people love that song. And that's like I can't stand that song. It sounds so dumb to me.
Well, so let's break that down for a second. Birthday, I would agree with you, is just kind of like, why?
Yeah.
And I blame Yoko, maybe. I don't know.
Hey, maybe. Well, Paul sang it though. I don't think Paul would have sang a song that Yoko wrote.
I don't know. I haven't seen the documentary, so maybe you're right.
I haven't either. I've been wanting to, but I haven't had a chance yet.
Supposedly, it's great. Birthday. Back in the USSR, though, I wouldn't be like, hey, let's go jam to back in the USSR. But from a musical perspective, for just the overall musicality of it, I think it's a good song.
Okay.
Because it has a lot of the elements in it that I break songs down. I break music down into group categories for myself.
Okay.
I will forgive. I will prioritize lyric over musicality in some cases. Like if it's a good lyric, but it's kind of like, this arrangement's weird or whatever. But if I just listen to the lyric of a song, I'll be like, I appreciate the effort on the lyric side, but I think maybe they dropped the ball on the production.
Right. Back
in the USSR is one of those where it's like, dude, this is, when you're talking about that beat, and it's just like, dude, they're getting after it. And it's like, what are they going to do? It's like, wow, okay, they just took a left turn.
Right.
It doesn't. So there's a mismatch for me there. But then again, it's the Beatles.
Yeah.
So it's like, dude, like Rocky Raccoon.
Yeah. See, but I love that song.
I do too.
That's a fantastic
I love that
song.
That, and then A Day in the Life is another one. Man, it's like, dude, I love this. And it's just that, they get in that pocket, dude, and they're just sitting there. And it's like, man, these dudes are good, man. Really good.
Is that one on, isn't Day in the Life on Sgt. Pepper's?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like the last song, right? Yeah.
I think so. And it's weird because I think it does there's an intro to it, but those are two separate tracks, two separate songs. I think there's usually the one, like if you were just to go into A Day in a Life by itself, it was like, wow, it's disjointed. There's this weirdness. And that's because that previous track comes into it. It's designed,
right.
In my estimation anyway.
Yeah. Well, then it ends with what sounds like a car accident or something, right? There's like that weird, loud noise at the end. And then it comes in with like an orchestra and it's just kind of like stops, right? Am I thinking of the right song?
I think so.
Yeah. Today, oh boy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
that's the whole thing. And it's like, okay, and it reminds me of another band that I never really got into a whole lot, but I appreciated their rock operas, The Who.
Oh, dude. See, I got into The Who later in life. But I love them. They're like probably in my top 5 classic rock bands. I mean, and even with them, they're similar to the Beatles. You go to the earlier stuff and it sounds very early Beatles, and you get into the later like Tommy and some of the other, and you listen to like Baba O'Reilly has got to be one of the greatest songs ever made. I mean, it's just classic.
They're really good, but I think there's this phenomena about the bands that came out, that would be the, contemporaries of the Beatles. So you have breakouts, right? Because you have Black Sabbath, you have The Who. Led Zeppelin's been around for a long, long time. The Rolling Stones.
Right.
or another one. They've all been around for a long time. Shoot, even Brian Johnson from AC/DC was singing in a band called, gosh, I forget the name of the band. He was with Geordie. Okay. He was with a band called Geordie back in the 60s.
Oh,
and
really?
He kind
okay.
of, yeah. So, the late 60s, 70s. And they actually headhunted him. So after Bon died, they found him and invited him. And it's interesting to listen to how
Is
he's
that
like,
because like he sounded similar, or I mean, because Bon Scott had a pretty unique voice to begin with. You know,
it was about as seamless, I think, as they could get.
Yeah.
He was a hard driving whale. You know, he's Brian Johnson.
Yeah.
And Bon was, he was a force, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he really was.
Do you have a preference?
I like Brian Johnson.
I do too. A lot of people disagree with that with me, but I also like Sammy Hagar better than David Lee Roth, and I know I've been crucified multiple times for that.
I'm team Sammy.
Okay.
I love Sammy Hagar, man, all the way back from his Montrose days.
Yeah.
And then, of course, songs like Three Lock Box, from Sammy Hagar. And then, but then again, though, I mean, I have to, in full disclosure, I was never into Van Halen. So when it became Van Hagar's, like, so what? I mean, to me, it was like, I wasn't in that space, so it really didn't make a whole lot of difference to me. But now I see him now, he's all over YouTube. I like listening to him. I like just him as a personality. I think I like him.
David Lee Roth, you mean?
No, Sammy Hagar.
Oh, Sammy Hagar. Okay. I was like, because David Lee Roth, he drives me crazy whenever I see him. And
no, he's a wingnut. Man, sadly, I kind of, this is maybe going to come across a little bit more disrespectful than I mean it to, but I kind of view Axl Rose the same as David Lee Roth.
Oh yeah.
Only because it's like, dude, GNR was amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing band.
Oh,
just one of a kind, like, these dudes are the real deal.
Oh, when
love
Appetite for Destruction came out, you're like, oh my gosh.
Axl Slash. And it was like Axl Slash and those other guys.
Yeah.
Because it's like, now you have Axl Rose Slash. Right. And then, the other ones. Well, of course, Tommy Lee.
No.
I guess. Okay.
No.
Wrong
band, homie. Wrong band.
Oh, that's right. That's Motley Crue. Motley Crue. So we're gonna have David Lee Roth, Axl Rose, and Vince Neil. Okay. All of those dudes should have quit after 10 years. Yeah, but they didn't. In my opinion, but they didn't.
Yeah,
and they've kind of ruined the. So again, GNR. It's like, I like when Axl Rose filled in for Brian Johnson because of his whole hearing thing. And
I heard about that. I never heard it, but I heard that had happened.
Yeah, and he comes in and he's in this, like, he had like a broken leg or something, and they're wheeling him in, and he's like, it's like, dude, this reminds me of some David Allan Coe concert or something where the dude can't stand up with his guitar and he's, a bigger legend. Yeah. But I don't want to be too disparaging against Axl.
It's so funny though, because like I said, Appetite for Destruction was just phenomenal. Then they had the GNR Lies, which was kind of like that little EP they had in between there, which had Patience on it, which was a big hit. But then you get into like Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, which came out in the early 90s, which were great. I mean, there's just a double album if you think about it. But then what happened after that, man? They had a big hiatus, and then they came out with like the Spaghetti Incident, I think was the next one. And it was like, what happened to you guys? Like, this isn't even close. I mean, there's not very many bands for me that I feel like that about. Like, it was just so good and then so bad, like right after. I mean, all bands kind of taper off as they go, of course. But I mean, this was so abrupt. Like, you go from Use Your Illusion 2 to the spaghetti incident, and I'm like, did you guys even try on this one? I mean, what's happening here? You know?
Right. Well, I think for me that going back to that era, the 80s, 90s, we were, of course, very radio centric still back then. Right. There wasn't downloads. There wasn't. And so it was like you could go to a record store and buy a tape. AC/DC, Back in Black, I think I owned eight of those tapes, only because they'd fly out of the car. Like I'd keep them up on my dash and go around a corner and they'd fly. Oh, I have to go and spend another.
Because of course you're driving like a maniac listening to that.
Well, the car had a metal dash on it, so everything slid around. But
I just had a memory when we first met. You were telling me a story, and you're gonna have to fill in the blanks here because I'm sure I'm getting a lot of this wrong. I want to say it was AC/DC. I think it was Thunderstruck. But you said something because like when you were in the military, you said something about stepping foot on somewhere with that playing, or was that the song? Do you remember the memory I'm talking about?
So somebody, and maybe it was my ex, or somebody came up with a tape of AC/DC, Razor's Edge.
Okay.
And I had a Walkman. This was in 1990, 91.
Okay.
Yeah, this would have been in 91. So I had a Walkman with the headphones. And we were in Saudi Arabia, just getting ready to make the invasion into Iraq. And because they had been bombing and everything. And they're like, hey, it's go time. We're going to, start the ground war. And so I was in an artillery unit. And so each artillery piece, the howitzer itself, had an ammunition carrier that followed it. So you'd have your guns were battle loaded, but you'd have an additional ammunition carrier. Well, that ammunition carrier was a tracked vehicle with like this bench seat in the front, flat front thing, and in the top it had this turret, and up on the turret is a 50 cal machine gun mounted.
Okay.
So you had one on the top of the howitzer, one on the top of the 5.48, and it was my job when we made the first assault over the berm to be on this 50 cal machine gun. And dude, we're going probably 30, 40 miles an hour. This is off-road, dude, and you're doing this. So I'm sitting there, people listening are probably going, oh, I wish I could see this video because Ian's probably being an idiot, which I am. But I'm holding on to this. I am holding on to this 50 cal going over the berm, and all of a sudden, I had Thunderstruck playing. And dude, to this day, every time I hear it, man, the adrenaline starts pumping because it's like, the whole, and it's just like, oh my gosh, dude. And then it was awesome. So that album, so this is going to be weird to you, maybe.
I hope so.
AC/DC, Belle Biv DeVoe.
Nice. Poison.
Yep.
Nice.
And any number of other black artists, bands, because I was in the Army.
Right.
And a lot of my friends were black guys that would listen to like Belle Biv DeVoe.
Right.
Was it Boys to Men or whatever it was? And so I was like, dude, I like that music too. That's really cool, man. I mean, you go back to like the musicality of it. It's like, dude, these dudes are really cool.
That's one of my favorite eras is that 90s like R&B soul stuff that was so good back then. Love it.
Right. So, but yeah, the AC/DC, man, to this day, I mean, I have a hard time reconciling in my mind that album's that old. Because then I think back to like, was it Stiff Upper Lip came out after that?
Yeah.
And there's been some others, but my fallback, AC/DC, and the ones, like when I introduce bands to my kids, I will say, I want you to, let's listen to some Back in Black. Let's listen to some Razor's Edge.
What do they think? Because how old are your kids now? The younger two are what?
So Ava's 4 and Wynn is 7. They'll be 5 and 8 in February.
So
And
you play these bands to them, and they bop their heads. They get into it, huh? Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things. I want to introduce them to these things because I kind of want to control the narrative a little bit. It's like, listen, because we primarily just listen to worship music now.
Right.
And which, Lauren Daigle and Crowder and any of them, on K-Love. Mercy Me is another one. The current favorite in the house, they're not my personal favorite, but they really everybody seems to love them, is For King and Country.
Oh, they're epic, dude. I've seen them live twice. They're so good.
They are, but Burn the Ships, dude. Now you talk about that's a whole other conversation, dude.
That's my favorite album by them.
That song with, and then when you look at their video for Little Drummer Boy, it's like, dude, it's like that's the ship from Burn the Ships. It's this whole montage of their different things. It's just cool. So
Did I ever tell you that I'm in one of their music videos?
No.
I'm in God Only Knows, the song God Only Knows. Yeah. So they did a video of it. I think there's a few versions, different videos they did, because they had different singers. I think they have one with not Dolly Parton. No, I'm thinking anyway, they have one with a female singer whose name I forget the name of her now. But we saw them play down in LA. I was with a friend of mine and his daughter, and it was me and Addie. And they sang a while, and they said, hey, we're going to do this song God Only Knows, but we're actually recording it for a music video right now. And there's this is like a remix version that's going to feature this girl, I forgot her name now, who's going to be on vocals as well. And you're going to see her come out backstage, and and they said the only reason we're telling you this, we're probably going to do it 4 or 5 times. So you're just going to have to listen to us play this song over and over again because we're doing a video. And we're like, okay, cool. That's kind of cool. So we watched the whole thing, and it's coming out and all this stuff. Well, then the video comes out, and we're watching it. We're going, oh my gosh, there's us! And you can see me, you can see Addie, and you can see my friend Ed, because he's 7 feet tall. He's just this ginormous guy, and we're totally in there. And it's so everybody I'm freeze framing it, sending everybody freeze frame the picture, circling it with the red thing in the picture. And, hey, check this out! I'm famous.
Right. Yeah, that is really cool, man.
Yeah.
Like I said, I like them. Style wise, they're not really my cup of tea. I'm more of a David Crowder. But Mercy Me is another one. I really like Mercy Me.
Yeah.
There's something special about Lauren Daigle that I just it's a tone thing for me.
Well, she sounds just like Adele to me.
Yeah, what I think is funny, that's a good way to put it, because what I think is funny, you have Adele, you have Lauren Daigle, they shouldn't be touched. They should just be left. Don't cover them. It's not going to go well for you. Right. And I've seen too many people try to cover Lauren Daigle songs because they connect with a lyric or they connect with a meaning. My only criticism to Lauren Daigle, and it's not a criticism against her at all, really. It's more, I guess, an industry criticism is I don't know that all of her songs really should land on Christian radio. They do, but they're so arbitrary. It's like, dude, you could be singing this to your cat or your dog or, your lesbian girlfriend for all I know, it's not and that's why I do tend to really appreciate songs with a clear theological stance, for King and Country. But that being said, if I had my choice of 100 artists that I've listened to over the years and Lauren Daigle was on there, probably a 99% chance I would want to listen to her, because she is I think, and it's just a credit to the whole organization that she belongs to. They're really good at what they do. But I think the one band I didn't mention is Metallica, and they are. Well, there's a few I didn't mention, but Metallica. You want to hear something bizarre?
Yes.
I hadn't thought about Metallica in years, And then I'm scrolling through YouTube like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and it was this random video of James Hetfield, an interview with him. And I'm like, oh, dude, I haven't listened to this dude in a while. So I put it on. And of course, it's an algorithm, right? So now I start just getting every other video is a Metallica video.
Yeah.
So I intentionally studied Metallica through the years. But they're the ones I remember. It was 1983, 82 or 83, whenever that album, their first album came out.
Yep.
And I'm in a class in high school, and one of my buddies has this tape, and they're listening to it like on whatever their
Walkman or whatever,
Walkman or whatever. And it's just like all of a sudden, dude, it was just like wildfire, dude, Metallica.
Yeah.
And I'm in Santa Barbara. I grew up in Santa Barbara, and it was just like everything was Metallica.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, these guys are awesome. But again,
and that was just based on their first record.
Yes.
Wow. Which is easily
because it was
not even close to their best work. Wow.
But for me, that being said, though, it wasn't until 91, 92 that
Black
I
album.
really, the Black Album. That is where
Enter Sandman.
I really got into that. And then I had a job for a short time. I was a bouncer at a strip club. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah. We worked for beer. We worked for beer. Yeah, it was kind of one of those things. It was in a military town. I had been out of the military for about a year and a half, 2 years. And anyway, of course, every girl that was going to dance wanted to dance to some Metallica song, and only the ones at the top of the food chain got the Sandman.
How do you dance to Metallica? Like that's not really dance music.
Dude, they don't dance in those places.
No,
dancing, air quotes, right, that's a relative term.
Oh, you're talking about like strippers dancing.
It's stripper, yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, okay. They don't. But and then so I'd put them in the top 5, 6, 7 bands that just from a purely like technical standpoint. You listen to a Metallica song, it's like, dude, these dudes are so tight.
Right.
It's like, how do they?
No, dude. Yeah, musically, they're phenomenal. So do you have do you have a favorite album by them or a favorite kind of sound? No. Okay.
I like, it's funny. Again, you go back. So they're the same phenomena you have with Brian Johnson and Bon Scott. You have, of course, with Trujillo and
you had Cliff Barton, but then you had Jason
Newsted.
Yeah, he was in the middle.
Newsted.
Yeah.
I like him. I like Jason.
And he's probably my favorite too. I know people say Cliff, but I know.
See, Jason had the other factor. He was he's an amazing backing vocal,
right?
And dude, you listen to like tracks with him on, it's like, oh, you get chills, dude, because that's him. Yeah, giving those vocals in the background. It would be like listening to AC/DC without Malcolm Young,
right? Angus.
No, it's Malcolm, and then is it Cliff? Their bassist. Cliff Burton.
Yeah,
those two. The dynamic of those two with the vocal doing their thing, and of course, Malcolm's just an amazing rhythm player.
But the thing about like with Cliff Burton is he would have like those instrumentals that he would write where he would do like these bass. It'd sound like a regular guitar almost. Like what's the song? Pulling Teeth, I think it's called.
AC/DC's?
No, this is Metallica. It's either on.
Oh, so you said Cliff Burton. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, Cliff Burton is Metallica. He's the one that died. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to remember the name of AC/DC's
Oh, I don't know.
bass player. No, and the dude is amazing. But they bagged on him. I think he was a guy, he played with a pick. So a lot of people kind of bag on him.
Yeah.
But
that's always the thing, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. But then of course, see, and this is why music gives me anxiety. Cliff Williams is his name.
Okay.
That's
I was going to ask you about that, about why you were anxious about doing the music part. Is that why? Because you feel like you don't.
Scattered, man. I'm so scattered in it because we talk about all these things. I can't define my taste to like one genre over another because I could, if I'm in a mood, dude, let's listen to some Ice-T.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Or NWA. It's like, cool, man. Yeah. I'm down with that. But then I go back and I'm like, dude, I want to listen to, Levon Helm and the band, or I want to listen to Bob Dylan but then you've got, in my opinion, I guess, if I was just to snatch one out of all of them, and you're going to probably, I know we disagree on this.
Oh, bring it. Oh, I like Pink Floyd. I like Pink Floyd.
Oh, for some reason I didn't think you did.
No, I like Pink Floyd. Yeah, they're not my favorite, but I mean, musically, I don't think anybody's ever done it like they have. It's just a whole different feeling you get listening to Pink Floyd.
They accomplished their Pink Floyd. Mm-hmm. That's all you can say. Mm-hmm. It's like saying, "Oh, that band sounds like." Queensryche, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Silent Lucidity.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't know better, you'd listen to that song. You go, dude, that's Roger Waters and, David Gilmour. Right. No, it's Queensryche.
Yeah.
But that's how recognizable that whatever it is that Pink Floyd has. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Aerosmith's one of those too.
Okay.
You start hearing Aerosmith, it's like, and I guess in all fairness, Van Halen too, but it's just like you recognize.
Yeah. Right.
But the second, like Angus Young, for instance, starts playing, it's like, oh yeah, that's AC/DC.
Yeah. And to me, so that's what sets somebody like that apart, because there's bazillions of bands in the world, right? Billions of bands.
Yes.
But when there's a person that has perfected their instrument in such a way that as soon as you hear them playing, even if it's a song you've never heard before, you know who's playing it. It's easier with like a vocalist, because a lot of times a vocalist is very easy to distinguish. Like you hear James Hetfield or Brian Johnson or whatever, you're like, oh yeah, I know who that is. But like to hear a guitar riff and go, oh, that's so and so or whatever. It's like that's awesome. Or a drummer. Like there's a lot of people that can hear like John Bonham, from like Led Zeppelin. I think he was so unique in drummers that people would listen to it and go, oh, I know that's John Bonham because no one else has ever done that before.
Yeah.
It's just, that's so cool to me.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I think that's part of what lends to my anxiety. It's like, I don't want to be disrespectful to these people that are good. And because like you mentioned, music is so subjective that I don't feel like my opinion needs to have any weight on it.
Yeah.
But because there's so many good bands, there's so many good musicians. There's, even into the country side of things too. I mean, just so many solid players and people that have poured their entire lives into the craft. And it's, not necessarily their fault. They get stuck with some, gig that, the singer was no good or whatever. Right. It's like, yeah, but listen to that bass. Listen to those drums,
Right.
And it took me a long time and I think it really came down. I used to be married to a lady that her family was very musical.
Okay.
Like Motown. Her dad was a Motown recording engineer.
Oh, wow. Like back in the day, Motown, like
yeah. So his friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, were all like Ike Turner, Tina.
No way.
Ray Charles was his best friend,
dude. So this is your ex's dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was a very, very gifted musician, and like I'd imagine. Like his friends were Stevie Wonder and all of the Motown people, and Ray Charles was his best friend. And you get this gentleman sitting down at a piano. He was old back then, even. He did things with a piano. I'm like, I never heard that before.
Yeah.
It was music, man. I mean, it was truly just inspired.
Yeah.
And what I took from that experience is getting to know him was he listened to music differently. He keyed in on different things within music, and he appreciated all effort.
Yeah. It's like, it's that natural talent that you're just kind of, some people are born with, you know what I mean?
Right.
So do you think that that's something that's been lost over the years? Like, is there any like new things coming out that you feel that way about, or does most of it end up back in that era, back in the early days?
Well, I think when I think about like worship music, for instance, I think that there's some good, originality within that. Even though it's not necessarily in my favored wheelhouse of genre.
Right.
But I listen to K-Love, right? So it's like, they're all over the map.
And it's positive. It's positive and encouraging. So, I mean, you can't.
Right. And so
can't go wrong there.
No, I think that I listen to a lot of it. I try to give it the benefit of the doubt. I think that though I applaud originality over, like I think back to like the Beastie Boys, for instance.
Right.
And
a
it's
group
like
that no one has ever been able to copy.
Because they can't.
No.
They're the Beastie Boys.
That's what I mean. And there's such a small group of people like that, that you say, okay, these guys, I mean, take the Beastie Boys. Let's use that example. These guys came out right in the beginnings of hip hop, right? Which was predominantly a black genre.
Right.
And these three guys who originally started as a punk band, they just decided to be like, hey, let's just start doing some of this. And I mean, and you listen to them, and at first you're like, they got kind of like whiny, like voices. It's not like they're like, it wasn't like you were listening to like Run DMC or like some of the pioneers of that thing, but it worked. And even today, you listen back to songs like No Sleep Till Brooklyn and Brass Monkey and some of these. It's like, dude, that's just. And then even later, as they got into and they kind of started adding more elements of some of the like more punk sound, like it's that song Sabotage, which is a full on punk song. It's not even a rap song at all. And it's just, yeah, dude. I mean, amazing to me when I think about bands like that or artists like that are able to just create something so original and unique to the point that no one else can ever even reproduce it, Right.
And I think I guess if I was to put a word to it, I mean, they're pioneers.
Yeah.
Because you have like Grandmaster Melly Mel and the Furious Five.
Right.
Run DMC. You have these breakout guys like Vanilla Ice.
Yeah.
And
best rapper of all time.
But then in that, you've got like, was it EMF?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you got these one-offs. It's like, oh, that's kind of a catchy little song, but but I mean, but then the whole 80s thing, Depeche Mode, Boy George, all of it. And it's like, dude, they were just doing their thing, but in that you have constants through it. And that's where I think people that I tend to fall back to as my kind of my base in music, I guess.
Yeah.
In genre. So you have your classic country. So if I was to say, hey, what do you think of Blake Shelton, or what do you think of this person here? I compare them back immediately to Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson.
Yeah. Milli Vanilli.
Milli Vanilli, and which is they're timeless.
Of course.
So I'm going to actually apply to be back on the show. We'll just dedicate it to Milli Vanilli. And then we'll just
Milli Vanilli episode.
We'll basically
what we'll do though is we'll have it be like it'll be someone else's vocals and we'll be just lip syncing to them.
It'll be a bad lip syncing. Bad lip syncing
bad
over
lip reading.
it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
But I'll tell you another band that I have a lot of respect for them is Iron Maiden.
Mm-hmm. Iron
Maiden is one of those bands that when I was young, I was introduced to Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and then of course you had Queensryche was kind of on the periphery.
Right.
Twisted Sister.
Oh, love Twisted Sister.
Yeah, great band. And Dee Snider is just awesome. And
he's great. Yeah.
Enduring personalities, right?
Right.
But you take somebody like Iron Maiden and it's like people go, oh, that's like devil music, because of like Eddie. And it's like, well, okay. Now
Eddie is the zombie guy on the cover, right?
Yeah, Eddie is Eddie, right? He's the traveler.
Okay.
But now go back, and if you really dissect the messages through the song, these aren't a celebration of 666, the whole Vincent Price thing. They're not a celebration of that.
Right.
This is Eddie's travel through the time. And these experiences and needing to escape this. He sees the danger in these, so they're really, and then, they're one of the, I haven't been to a lot of concerts in my life.
But you saw them.
I saw Iron Maiden at Red Rocks.
Dude.
And guess who opened for them?
What year was this?
This was this was at the beginning of their Brave New World tour. So this would have been in 2001, 2002.
Okay.
And Halford opened for them and Queensryche opened for them. Rob Halford, that dude's band is insane.
Yeah.
How good they are. I mean, so they're good. And then Queensryche comes out and I'm sitting right in the middle, like center stage, right in the middle. And I'm looking at the stage. I was just getting over the flu and my ex, she's like, are you sure you want to go? I'm like, I ain't missing this for the world. Went, had my little beer, and I looked just like a kid in a candy shop. I'm waiting. I'm sitting there looking, and there's nothing happening. And then Queensryche comes on. People fill in, right? So now there's people all around me, and Queensryche comes on, and they're playing, and then they end their set with Silent Lucidity.
Nice.
I'm like, cool, man. Yeah. That was good. That was good,
Yeah.
After they are leaving, everybody in front of me gets up. They're like, okay, let's go. I'm like, what the? Dude, you're lame. So then Halford comes on. Oh, my gosh. Dude, this guy, man, his guitar player, I couldn't name one person in the band, but these guys were amazing. Amazing, dude. And Halford, of course, he's just up there just shredding it, because he's,
I don't know. This might surprise you. I don't know who that is.
Judas Priest.
Oh, okay. So this was like a side project he's doing?
Well, his solo stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, so now if you see him, he's tall dude, bald head, like a flaming homosexual.
Okay.
But he was They were good, real good.
Okay.
And so I'm sitting there. They leave, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, cool, man. And the sun's starting to go down. The stage lights come on, and Nico comes out and gets behind his drum kit, dude. And you could kind of hear the sticks a little bit, dude. And all of a sudden, man, he hits this freaking bass note, dude. Hits me straight in the chest.
Nice.
Boom. I'm just like, dude, this is awesome, man. This is so good. This is, I could have died right there, and I've been like,
yeah,
this is amazing, dude. You know, and then of course the other guys come out and they're playing their guitars and you know their bass, and then Bruce comes out, and it was on 120% all night.
Would you put this as one of your favorite shows of all time?
Yes, I would, because number one, I don't have a lot of experience with it, but if I was my only regret in never going to see a show was I would have loved to have seen Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
And I really would like to have seen the original lineup of AC/DC.
Okay. With Bon Scott, I mean?
No, with Brian
Johnson.
What I mean, before Malcolm passed.
Gotcha.
So, but Iron Maiden, dude, oh my goodness. So I'm sitting there, and they play their entire Brave New World with Wicker Man, all of that. And I'm sitting there going, dude, this is so great.
Yeah.
So great. And I'm like, I really wish, though, I'm thinking, I'd really love to hear some throwback stuff. I want to hear Number of the Beast. So they leave, but nobody moves. Nope. And all of a sudden, dude, the lights, and then you hear Vincent Price, and Eddie comes up out of it. Nice. Like, dude.
They saved that for the encore, huh?
And they did it. Wow. And it was so good, man. And
that's how you know you're bold. Is like, you know, like we got this big production we're going to do, but we're not going to do it till the end when they call us back on stage. Because you're like, you got to be sure of yourself that people are going to want you back after for an encore.
Yeah. And it was just like, it was so... But I really, you know, I got into it, man. I was like, I really appreciate them. And to this day, I really, you know, not fanboying or anything, but just from a very solid perspective, I really appreciate that band.
Yeah.
And I would hold them.
So here's another thing. I remember that band growing up because I used to see the covers. I used to think the covers were cool, you know, because the artwork and stuff was really neat. And you always had this like creepy looking zombie guy on there. But I could not tell you. But I don't know. So anyway, I would ask you this, since you're such a big fan. If I was to start with any album by Iron Maiden, which one would you have me start with?
I would go back to the beginning.
Like go to first album?
Number of the Beast, Power Slave. The only one that's weird, and I've never listened to it a lot, is Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. That one is a departure. So they had a different singer. They've had a few different singers.
Oh, really?
Bruce Dickinson has been the mainstay, but there's another gentleman. He's good, but. You talk about, you know, kind of left turns bands sort of take creatively. Yeah. Bruce, to me, is the glue.
Okay.
He's such a, number one, I mean, he's just this amazing vocalist and a true craftsman of what he does. I kind of feel like he is to Iron Maiden what maybe Angus Young is to AC/DC.
Okay.
They're in my mind anyway, that's the pure part of it for me. But you take like Nico McBrain, their drummer, but then you go back to like, if you put any other drummer in there, I don't know if it would work for me, to be honest with you.
Well, that's awesome. That's like I was saying before, that's neat.
Yeah,
I like that. You know, I like that. So, all right. Well, in a second, we're gonna end with your top favorite bands or artists, and you can use some of the ones that you've already mentioned, and we can rehash that real quick. But before that, I want to go back to something you were talking about, some of the worship music and the Christian artists and that kind of thing. And I think you were talking about Lauren Daigle. That's who it was. And you were saying you're not sure all of her songs should be on Christian radio because maybe not every song has to do with Jesus, and this is a battle that a lot of bands always have. That's why you have some bands will say, some will say we're a Christian band. Other times they'll say we're Christians in a band. Right. And the difference being, it's like, yes, we're Christians, but not every song we write is going to be about Jesus. You know what I mean? So like for you, like, what are your thoughts on that? I guess is what I'm asking. Like, is there a difference there? Like, do you think everybody that bills themselves and is outspokenly Christian, do you think all of their music should be about Jesus or something to do with Christianity? Or
that's an interesting question. That's a really interesting question because on one hand, my immediate just gut response would say no.
Right.
I think that all things can be glorifying to God. He gave people gifts for certain things. And now let me just take this just in a slightly different direction for a moment.
Sure.
Because this is where my mind goes. Are they forcing God into something where he doesn't necessarily need to? It's awkward. Does that make sense? Like
when they force his name into a song and
it's like, it's sort of like the prayer hands on Facebook. It's like praying, it's like, no, you're not. It's like John Chris. I ain't praying for that.
Right.
No, you're not. It's just this. It's a cliche. It's disingenuous to me. I think that true, take a song like God Only Knows.
Yeah.
That is a true song because it's a true statement, number one. And I think that when they sing it and when they're putting that message out there, there is meaning to a number of different people.
Yes.
Believers, non-believers. Sure. It is grabbing people in a way that brings them in and hopefully makes them think, okay, I'm really not alone with this unwanted pregnancy, or I'm really not alone in, addiction. I'm really not alone in these situations. And that's true. You're not alone when we think about, hey, the God of the universe who created you knows you.
Right.
And cares for you and wants you to, be okay. And I think I would rather listen to a band that, I don't know. I think I lost my train of thought in that question because it is interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so there's bands like that song specifically. I think it reaches into where people are at. And I think that's why that song had such a big impact, even in the secular world. Like there were secular singers covering that song.
Right.
And I think it's because everybody's dealing with things. We all have our struggles and our issues, and they're all different. But for a song like that to be like, God only knows what you've been through. God, it's comforting, and I think that's a relevant kind of song to where something like, and this is why I prefer, at least lyrically, I prefer hymns over contemporary worship music. And that's only because I feel like the hymns are more genuine. They're more reality, to where a lot of the not all of them, but a lot of the contemporary songs are just like, Jesus is great. Jesus is awesome. He is the best. He makes me feel so good. It's like, it's all this like just cheesy, superficial crap that doesn't really get to the heart of anything,
Right. And it's, I'm going to say something that some might feel is controversial.
Yeah.
But it's weird.
Yeah.
It turns people off. And that's, to me, whether I know they're probably mean well, but dude, you're doing more harm than good.
Right.
Don't, it's like when I meet somebody on the street, and this is one of the things we can get into it later, but about like street preaching, it's like I get hives at even the thought of street preaching, and I've done it. And I'm like, I'm not built for this, man.
Right.
I don't want to force a confrontation with somebody. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's necessary. And I really just kind of want to, I don't know. That's just my personal.
Yeah. Well, so I just wrote that down. So I want to talk about that for sure. Because I had people on that I had a guy on, he hasn't released yet, but it was a couple of weeks back he spends most of his days doing just that. Like he's big time evangelist on the streets. He's talking to everybody from drug addicts to, prostitutes. But
he's gifted with it.
He is.
I'm sure he's totally gifted with it. And I would sit there and I'd listen to him and be like, man, I wish I was more like him. Right. You know, I really wish I had that gift, but I don't. Yeah. I'm okay with that.
And that's okay, right? We're not all called to the same thing, which is cool. So, all right, well, hey, let's end on this. And like I said, you mentioned a lot of bands that mean a lot to you. Obviously, some of the bands you've already mentioned. So if some of these are repeats, that's totally fine. But just give me your top 5 favorites.
I think my top 5, if I was to put like a playlist together, I'd have, and they're in no particular order, but Pink Floyd for sure.
Okay.
Iron Maiden. I probably would have to go with Waylon Jennings.
Okay.
Dolly Parton.
Ooh, nice.
And yeah, I'd probably have to stick AC/DC on there, but I don't know. They could go. And if you reminded me of something, but obviously I left a lot of great, well, because then you've got the band,
right?
Right. But golly, see, this is just anxiety.
Yeah. So you'd say then that probably like Milli Vanilli would be like somewhere around 7 or 8 then for you. They don't quite make the top 5.
They're the binding. They're the binding that holds the list. Okay. Ryan, whenever you say, let's make a list, just picture Milli Vanilli. Yes. They're the spiral. They're the paper that everything is written on. Okay.
Love it.
I could just imagine their little faces, you know, singing "I Will Always Love You" by Dolly Parton. Because I haven't even mentioned guys like George Jones or
you did now.
So many.
Yeah.
Many.
All right. So here's the last thing. Here's the last thing I'm gonna have you do before we move on to politics. And if you can't do this right now off the top of your head, totally fine. You can send me it later. But I like to get like 2 or 3 favorite songs from each of those top 5. If you know off the top of your head. So like if I said Pink Floyd, could you give me 2 or 3 of your favorite songs?
So Comfortably Numb.
Okay.
Is probably then Comfortably Numb is just one of those, man, where it's like, we could just end that list right there.
It gives you the feelers, man.
Everything just follows. That's the cornerstone for me.
Okay. So that's hands down your favorite Pink Floyd song.
Yeah, but okay. I could qualify that. It's my number one Pink Floyd song for many, many different reasons.
Okay.
Like I think just the lyric, just the music, just the sentiment and meaning and behind it. And I don't know. I think it's a personal thing too. I've been there and done that and kind of can relate to it in a way. I think most people can when they start listening to a lyric of a song that grabs them is like they're telling my story.
For most people, their favorite songs, that's exactly why, because it goes across the boundaries of just that song's really good. I like the way it sounds, and it becomes something that means so much to you personally. Like it becomes a part of your life where it's like, I listened to that song where I was going through this and it really spoke to me, or something along those lines.
Yeah. And then who else did I say? Iron Maiden.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Brave New World is a great song. Course Number, The Beast, The Trooper, Hallowed Be Thy Name. I mean, just that, that raw, and why They're just Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. All right. We got Waylon Jennings.
Oh gosh. I think Lonesome, Ornery, and Mean.
Okay.
You know, the old Outlaw. He's got so many. Again, they're speak to a time in my life where it's like, yeah, man, I, lived this type of thing. And I think what's interesting to me, though, is those songs that I speak about, they didn't shape my life. My life just happened to mirror them in a way. It's like I didn't listen to them and say, hey, I want to go be an outlaw like Waylon Jennings or, it's just they happen to be there. And I'm like, I can relate to that.
Okay. All right. AC/DC.
that is going to be Thunderstruck.
Okay.
Because of that connection. But
right.
I mean, dude, you got Back in Black.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other songs on that Thunderstruck album that they're good, but because they're funny. You know, like there's one called Mistress for Christmas.
Okay.
It's like, no, I don't play that one for my kids.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, dude, this is like raunchy kind of stuff.
Well, what's one of the early ones? Got You by the Balls. It's like she got you by the balls or whatever.
Oh, dude, like Highway to Hell. Dirty D's, Done Dirt Cheap.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, dude, you really listen to this stuff. It's kind of like it's not wholesome music.
Right.
It's more of I think for me, AC/DC is one of those more selfish sorts of things.
Right.
It's like, I'm just going to listen to it because
cool. It's funny that it's not wholesome because, I mean, we all know that they kind of set out to be, the most wholesome band that they could be. I mean, they're in their minds when they started the band, they're in their heads, they thought their audience was going to be mostly, church going families and things like that.
Yeah.
June Cleaver and kind of the whole deal.
Right. And oddly enough, if you listen to interviews with them, Brian Johnson's one of the nicest guys I've ever seen.
Yeah,
interviewed.
Totally. Yeah, I've seen it.
Total sweet man.
Yep.
And it's like, there's a disconnect a little bit for me.
Yeah.
All
right. So you mentioned the band. So throw out a couple of songs by them as well.
The Weight.
Okay.
The Weight is my favorite song by the band.
Okay.
Levon Helm has a song called Poor Old Dirt Farmer. That is probably, he's an integral part of the Weight or the band. I don't know if you know who he is.
I don't.
He's their drummer. And if you listen to that song, The Weight, he's the one that's singing that. They've also done it with Mavis Staples, the Staples singers.
Yep.
So a lot of those, but it's been covered by so many different people. But man, if I think back to just a good, solid American rock band, those are the dudes. I really, really like those guys.
Okay, so let's end with the one that surprised me the most on your list, which was Dolly Parton.
Yeah, so Dolly Parton,
that was going to come out of your mouth. Not in a million years.
So I think that anything from her, from Jolene to Butterfly, it's the lyric would be "Love is like a butterfly, soft and gentle." I think it has a smile or something. It's a great song.
Butterflies don't smile, dude.
Yeah, but it's a metaphor.
Oh, okay.
It's very deep.
They make you smile. Butterflies make you smile. Yeah.
I think just that softness, the gentleness. But I also really appreciate her in there. There was Jesus with that new guy. She was real good. But I think just overall, again, it comes down to the longevity of her. Overall, just the personality. I prefer to have a little mystery in there. I don't like to know a whole lot about these people because I'm afraid it'll ruin them for me.
Right. Yeah. For her, it was like, it's funny because we went, as you know, we were looking at moving to Tennessee for a while, and we had gone over there a few times and with a realtor looking at us. So Bethany and I took some trips, and one of the trips we drove from here to Tennessee, and we had Addie and Asher with us. So it was like a huge road trip. It was a lot of fun. But we ended up going to Dollywood, which is over there in eastern Tennessee. And that was a blast. I mean, it was really cold. It was raining. Like we were all bundled up. Everybody could tell we were from California because we were bundled up as if it was like 40 below out there.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I didn't really know a whole lot about Dolly Parton until we went there. And I mean, yeah, it's a theme park. It's got rides and stuff, but it also has a lot of history about her. And you'd watch some of these shows and you'd learn how she grew up. And, you know, there's a thing you walk through that's like a exact replica of the home she grew up in. It's like a 1 or 2 bedroom house with and she had like 10 siblings or something. Like she had this amazing amount of children in that family. And, you know, so you hear how she grew up just totally poor and destitute and just trying to feed all these mouths, and how she started singing and became it was really neat for me. Cause before I went there, I wasn't like, not that I ever disliked Dolly Parton, but I was never like, I love Dolly Parton. But I had a newfound respect for her after I left there. And that caused me to want to listen to some of her music, you know?
Sure. Yeah. And I think music, if you can listen to it objectively, and you can just sort of like, okay, I get it. You know, not necessarily for me per se, but I get it. I understand, you know, and I try to be more that way with music because I don't want to be. There are definitely bands that I hate, but
well, like let's hear one, man.
I can't stand Thin Lizzy.
Oh, okay.
I can't stand that band.
I don't know why. What's their really popular song? I can't.
The Boys Are Back in Town.
The Boys Are Back in Town. Yeah.
Dude, like, I wish that song I could unhear that.
Is that? I think that's the only song I know by them.
Yeah, right?
Does all their music suck, or just that song?
I don't know. I've never given them a second chance. Okay. I just can't. I don't like it. I don't know what it is about them. If there's something I just don't know, man. I don't know how to put my finger on it. It's not really my thing. But there's a number of those where it's like I hear them once, like,
yeah,
you know, no, not for me. But then there's some, it's like, wow, how come I've never heard this band before? They're awesome.
Like the one that you looked up with me and Danny, and you still don't remember the name of.
Right. Yeah, I know. I need to. But Motorhead is one of them that I'm like, I'd never heard them.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm like, dude, this is awesome, man.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, it was after Lemmy died and everything. I'm like,
right.
Motorhead, that's cool.
Yeah, Motorhead was like Metallica covers a lot of Motorhead songs.
Yeah,
they have a lot of covers of those.
Right.
That's cool.
Right.
Real quick, I wrote this down. I forgot to mention this when we were talking about Van Halen. Are you familiar with the band Nerf Herder?
No.
Okay, they're from Santa Barbara area. Perry Grip is one of this is the singer, and he went on to do like a bunch of like, what do you call them, jingles or like kids music that was really pop. Anyway, he was in a band called Nerf Herder that was like a poppy punk band, and they have a song called Van Halen. And if you haven't heard it, you got to listen to it. It's all about how he first heard Van Halen, became his favorite band, and then he loved it all. It's so awesome. And then Sammy Hagar came in, and then he started hating him, and he's like, this is the worst. But the song is hilarious. It's really, really funny. So you should check it out. Yeah. I think he'd appreciate it.
Right.
But all right, man, let's jump into some political discussion here. I know that I know you have political opinions because we have discussed them before. So I guess we'll just pick where we want to go with this. I mean, you kind of tell me what's on your mind lately, what's going on in the world that's causing your blood to boil or not, or making you so happy. You look at the country and think, man, this is like utopia, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to say though, and we talked about this, especially like on the Tuesday night Bible study. I've softened over the years, in the respect that I don't let it agitate me as much.
Okay.
And I really think that that's something the Lord's teaching me. It's not worth it. You get so riled up about things that, I think my fear in that though is I don't want to become apathetic in it. I don't want to become like a fatalist. Well, you know, Yeah. This is the Lord's plan, and it's whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah, it's all going to crap anyway. I might as well add to it.
Right, and I think that's wrong. And I don't know that, me getting agitated or me being outspoken on my opinions really adds anything to anybody's life. Mm-hmm. So I want to be careful of that type of thing. I think that's what I try to be sensitive about. And I don't know if that's just kind of the nature of my work, where I have to be careful with opinions. I'll speak on them when I'm asked, but I don't want to impose my opinions on other people. And I think part of it is I have my life filled with young children. I homeschool. I do. So I am given license to inject my opinions in their daily life.
Right.
They definitely are, have our view on the world and things.
So far, right?
Yeah. But my hope is, and see, that's not even the focus for me in that. My focus is teach them about God, teach them about Jesus, teach them about these things. And then everything else will kind of fall where it may. I'm sad for this country. I think that, like we mentioned before, I served in the Army. I was very idealistic when I went in. I went in when I was 17, went through desert. So went in 1986. The day I signed my contract, they bombed Libya. And it's like, oh, yeah. My dad's like, dude, you're going to war. And then, of course, a few years later, I'm in Saudi Arabia getting ready to invade Iraq. And that was a very eye-opening experience for me. Mm-hmm. It was very idealistic then. It was about, I was very, and still am, patriotic. I love this country, but I bought into the idea that whatever I was doing in the name, under my oath, with the American flag on my shoulders and all of that, I'm here for the interest of America.
Right.
And I believe that. But the reality of it is, and this is like real time gut check over there.
Right.
No, you're not. You're here because that dude wants his oil back.
Yeah.
They stole his oil. And it's like when you start hearing this from your regimental commander that you're having a private conversation with, and he's an older man, much older than me. At that time, I was 21, and he's giving me the rundown on the political landscape. This is why you're here, blah, blah, blah. And we're just like, I'm done.
So that was shocking to you at the time. You went in with a different idea of what you were doing. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that I've recently have met several Vietnam veterans that will tell you the same thing. It's like we didn't need to be there,
right?
But we try to separate it from our duty. Like if you put me in the military and you say, "Hey, listen, you took an oath. Here are your orders." I will do it. I will carry out my orders.
Right.
Within reason, we were never asked to do anything illegal or weird, but we were asked to do some pretty severe things.
Okay.
That we did follow out, or we would follow through with.
Yeah. So what kind of specifics could you give me about why, like what changed for you about your view of either America in general or just American government or anything like that during your time in the military?
I think when I started to realize that strings are being pulled, like you take Desert Storm, for instance, here we had the opportunity to just wipe Saddam Hussein off the map right there.
Right.
The reports we were getting, for instance, their army's starving to death in these foxholes out there. It's going to be easy to take them over because they're so starving and they're this. Well, every position that we took as a unit, they weren't starving. Right. They were well stocked. They were well armed. Mm-hmm. They were just willing. They'd come out of their foxholes with their arms up and they'd say, "We don't want to fight you."
Wow.
And they knew they'd get a fair shake that's coming. I wasn't in Kuwait. So that whole thing that happened down in Kuwait, that's a different scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that it was lined out was you had Saddam Hussein and his Republican Guard, and then you had the regular army. They put the regular army up on the front, and those are the people we just went in and mowed over them.
Right.
And then you had the Republican Guard, but you start hearing, you know, these people that we were mowing over, they're surrendering. It's like, we don't want to fight you. We were forced into this. We're pawns. So you had the Republican Guard behind them. You had the full force of the United States military in front of them, and they just throw their hands up.
Right.
So it was a very passive, you know, it's like, okay, come on. And then we moved through, and I ended up in Rumelia oil field, and that's where I saw I ended up in Basra, Iraq, and then Rumelia is just burning in the distance. You could see it, man. I mean, all those pictures you saw of these black columns of smoke coming up, that's what it was like. And it was horrifying. And we had some guys killed that day. And so it was one of those things where reality hit you.
Yeah.
Yes, I forget what the term they use against that action was, but it was a pure war. It was like you went in, you did your thing, and you left. Right. Well, we didn't do our thing. We should have taken Saddam out. And, you know, there's a whole lot of second guessing stuff.
So are you saying like even like your what do you call that? Your company or your
unit?
Your unit. Did your unit have the opportunity to take Saddam out? Or are you just saying like the government as a whole during that time?
Yeah, as a collective.
Okay. It wasn't like you saw him walking over there and you're like, we'll leave him alone for today.
No. And, you know, so I think, you know, that was a wake up call for not just me, but many of my friends. And, you know, so we went from having the mindset of lifers to I'm getting out. Yeah. I don't want anything to do with this, because you see, you know, you're really nothing. You're no more important to the collective than you're just a number, you know, but you're very good at your job. And that's, you know, we took it serious.
Yeah.
You know, when we do our fire missions, we were trained to do this. This is what we're going to do. If I go on patrol and I took some prisoners, I was trained, you know, this is what you do with prisoners. This is what but you know, you're looking in the eyes of these prisoners, man, and you're like, these people are just as confused as anybody else about what's going on. And the hatred that you'd see from some of these people, you know, it's like, golly, man, you know, it's a very uncomfortable type of thing, but
so,
you know,
so I was gonna say, so you were fairly young when you went in, and how many years were you in for?
So I was in for just under 6.
Oh, that's quite a while.
Yeah, so I went in when I was 17.
Okay.
Got out shortly before I turned 23. And so here's how that happened. When we came back from the Middle East, they had a massive force reduction. So they were offering people early outs. And me and probably most of my unit were like, yep, we'll get out.
Okay.
So it was this big reduction. This was George Bush was still in office. And I remember I went home.
W?
Yep.
No.
Regular
Bush.
H, okay. George Sr.
Gotcha.
I ETS'd, got my DD-214, got on a Greyhound bus and took it back to Santa Barbara. And I remember walking into my parents' house and they had a TV going, and Bill Clinton. I had never seen him, didn't know who he was. I looked at him and I heard him speaking. I said, "Who's this?" She's like, "Oh, that's Bill Clinton. He's running for president." I said, "Dude, that guy's a liar." I just knew, like right there. I said, "The dude's lying."
Just by looking at him, huh?
Just listening to what he's saying. I said, "The dude's a liar."
Yeah.
He's lying. He's lying about things.
And this is at 17.
No, I saw it as just under 23. So it's 22.
Oh, so this is after you're out of. military.
I'd been out, I'd done my deal and gotten out. And then of course we go into the Clinton era, and then of course you have Waco, Ruby Ridge, all of these things that happened under his watch, with Janet Reno and the FBI. And it was just kind of like, why are they making the moves against these people type of thing. So that kind of fuels some stuff. It's like, why is the government doing this type of thing?
Yeah.
And
at that point in your life, though, did you even hold to a party side? Did you consider yourself Republican or Democrat, or did you not really care either way?
So at that point, I voted for Ross Perot.
Okay.
I actually registered to vote, and I went and I voted for Ross Perot.
And he was independent party, right?
He was independent, and obviously they lost, but that was the last time I voted. Okay. And because I'm just kind of like,
still to this day? To this day?
No, I voted. I voted in 2016, and I voted in 2020.
Okay.
Because a part of that whole thing, Ryan, is that with everything else that I had going on in my life, I wasn't really living a lifestyle where I would care a whole lot for the big picture. I was just more interested in my independent individual thinking.
Right.
So it's like, I just knew that I didn't like Bill. I didn't like Hillary. I didn't really care for George W.
Yeah.
I don't see them as different, I guess.
Well, who do you like? Who, like, over the past, I mean, go from George Washington to now, are there any presidents that you feel like you did like?
I would, I think for me, I like principled men. So, I like the unwilling people. So I do like George Washington.
Okay. By unwilling, you mean he wasn't necessarily running for office. They just kind of
he was pushed into it, and I like, but I appreciate. And so you go back to the founding fathers, you had Jefferson, you had these people that were smart enough to see the bigger picture. And, that's at the framing of the Constitution and things like that. I think that they did the best that they could, knowing the nature of men, right? They said, it's a slippery slope. This thing's going to happen.
Right.
But they did their best. And what's interesting though, is if we go back to that time of Jefferson and Hamilton and that time, so late 1700s, early 1800s, and you look at how they dealt with each other, guess what they did? They each bought a newspaper, and they each printed their own side of things in independent newspaper.
Interesting.
So you had Hamilton was, really about the banks, and you had Jefferson who's like, no, you need more. So it's more of that. So I'm very much in many ways on the side of Jefferson. Okay. I want independent, I don't like big banks. I don't like big government. I want people I like industry, and I guess they call it capitalism, things like that.
Yeah. So you like a smaller government, smaller, like less involvement in our personal lives. But do you think the government has a function? Or do you think we should just have no government, or do you think a small government is good, better than none?
I think if you have a smaller government that can govern, and you're not necessarily in states' rights, you're not necessarily, after civil liberties, things like that. It's like all of those things should be handled, and I think the system is designed to be handled at the state level. Okay. So, for instance, Roe v. Wade was just overturned. Yeah. Everybody's just like, and they mistakenly thought that it was their constitutional right. It was never a constitutional right.
No.
So that was an error, but that's the gaslighting that happens, right? It's like, no, all these talking heads out there going,
because they don't, when it comes down to it, they don't care whether it's a constitutional right or not. It's just something they want.
Right.
So even if you tell them, that was never a constitutional right, they'd be like, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but here's the thing though. And they pointed this out and people wouldn't listen. It does not matter at that point what the federal government does. Mm-hmm. They can overturn Roe v. Wade, and they did through the Supreme Court. They overturned it, but now it all goes back to the states. Yeah. So each state has their sovereign right to do what they want to.
Right, which is why some states it's still legal and some states it's not.
Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, in the case of abortion, they capitalized on that and said, hey, we're going to make billions off of this industry and we're going to make ourselves a destination state.
Yeah.
Was it California, Arizona? I think some surprised me.
Yeah.
Then there's other states that went the other way. I think Georgia or Kentucky. I know Idaho is kind of one of those states where it was hotly debated up here, and we've been able to kind of hold it off. Ohio,
just
I just heard about that. That's crazy. But now I want to be careful here. Yes, I disagree with that, but I need to be willing to defend their right to make that decision, if that makes sense.
Explain.
Okay. I'll put it to you this way. I'll put it to you in different terms. Okay. Freedom of speech, the First Amendment.
Right.
I would say 100%. I don't want it. I don't want any limitations on speech. None.
Okay.
I don't like censorship. I think censorship is dangerous.
Right.
You could be the most outspoken pro-abortion, kill them all, and make gravy out of their guts sort of person, and be very outspoken and vocal about that. I need to be prepared in my position to defend your right to state your position.
To state the opinion.
Yes, to state your opinion.
Right.
And to say, listen, I disagree with you, but I support your right to state your position.
Yeah, and I would agree with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where I think it fails, though, is that person won't necessarily have my back. Now, if you see right now, they're like, you're the devil. We need to put them in jail. We need to do this.
They won't support your right to say that you believe abortion is wrong.
So they're pro-censorship.
Yeah.
That's a slippery slope. It's like
when we're talking about the actual action of abortion.
I think it's wrong.
Yeah, but you're not saying that you would defend their right to make that decision?
No, I defend the state's right to make decisions of that nature.
Yes.
I disagree with their decision.
Right.
But I would defend their right to make those decisions.
Because you want a free state. You want to be able to have the state to be able to come to those conclusions and make those decisions, even though not every decision that they make is going to be something you agree with.
That's right.
Okay.
So, for instance, I live in Idaho. You know that. Mm-hmm. I live in a town called Star. Star is a 2A sanctuary city.
Okay.
Which means that they've given everybody gun rights. It's a sanctuary city. Mm-hmm. There is no infringement on gun rights, regardless of what the federal government or state government might do. The city's sovereign in that. There's several of them out here.
Okay.
So I appreciate that. Now, but going back to this idea that, okay, Ohio, I want to protect their right as a state to make these decisions. Now, here's the catch, though. I would hope it's a sad state of things if this is truly the case. But if they open it to a vote and the majority of the people in that state vote for it, sadly, that's kind of that catch-22.
Right.
Like, where are they coming from? Well, I don't know. They did this weird thing with this abortion.
But wait, so what do you do in a situation then? Let's say that, this is a hypothetical, of course, but let's say you live in a city or a state where the government has the freedom to take a vote and to place something into law. And let's say it wins by a 60-40 vote that if someone gets mad at another person, it's okay to kill them. Like, would you at that point say, yes, I support the states. I mean, yeah, that's just the way that the cookies fell, I guess, in that scenario. I don't agree with that. I don't think you should be able to kill anybody. But now that's directly affecting your life, because now that means that if you cut somebody off, or you wear a shirt somebody doesn't like, or you have a political opinion somebody disagrees with, they can just go shoot you in the face, and they have no legal repercussions at all for that.
Yeah, I think for me it would come down to, I think there's a bigger underlying issue. And I think that's a separate. That's a separate. Well, I guess what I'm trying to do, Ryan, is I'm trying to have my side of the conversation be more like the letter of the law. Okay. This is what the constitutional state states. This is what our rights are afforded to us under the Constitution. They are not to be infringed upon. Mm-hmm. And now you have a whole other side of society that says, well, it's just this antiquated document. Yes, it can be changed. They're just more of suggestions, however they want to spin it.
Well, it's the same as a lot of Christian circles are doing that with the Bible. They're just like, well, that's, we'll use that when we like it, I completely agree with that, Ryan. Yeah. So, and what I'm saying is there's a fundamental underlying issue that's in play here, and that's just humanity. Right. A fallen world, I disagree with it in that scenario that you gave me. No, it's ridiculous. Why would we want that? Right. But, and I'm sure you're probably tying that back to the Ohio ruling, because that's 100%. That's from birth. That's from conception to like 9 months, man. Right. Right. Is they can abort a child. And but is there really any difference? I mean, is there really a difference between a 2-week-old fetus versus a 9-month-old baby as far as from a Christian standpoint anyway, right? It's the life of a life. Not just a Christian standpoint, but just from a biological standpoint. Right. That's the thing. That is the thing that I think people I hope understand, is that it isn't just a Christian value or a Christian moral that's in the right to life camp, pro-life camp. No, there's many secular people out there that are taking science and saying, no. This is a formed human being at conception. You have the sperm and an egg, and they give you the whole thing. And it's like, now you have the beginning of life. Right. And then it develops, gestate, just like any other animal. Yeah. Right. We just happen to eat chicken eggs. But guess what? You have roosters. They're all in the beginning stages of life. Right. You just have to get those. I don't eat those because I'm an animal rights activist. But no, and so for me, it's very hard to, I guess I want to be lenient. I want to be careful of the Constitution. I care for it. And I want to, it's like the 10 Commandments in the church or the courthouse in Texas years ago. Man, remember they were saying, well, they're going to pull the 10 Commandments down. Right. And I think that was recently rescinded. I think now they have them back in. But I think so. I had heard something very recently that there was some change in that where they were going to allow things back in. I think it was Texas. But, my thing is like, well, okay. I'm actually okay with that. And people are like, why? And I'm like, well, because if you look at the catalyst of that argument, they had the Church of Satan wanted to put up their thing. Sure. Well, okay. Yeah. Let them. Right. They have the same right as you do as a Christian. And people are like, well, wait. I'm like, listen, we are talking about, in my estimation anyway, two fundamentally different things here. Mm-hmm. We were talking about the United States Constitution. We were talking about the 10 Amendments, and we were talking about what many people still believe to be, the cornerstone of American society. Yeah, but that's where you get into the idea of freedom, right? You talk about like the freedom. See, if you're going to have freedom of expression or free speech or some of these constitutional rights that we're given, right? it can't be one-sided. And that's kind of the point you're making, I think, right? You can't say freedom of religion as long as it's not Satanism. Because it's no longer freedom of religion.
Well, if we look at the spirit of that, of the that amendment, and the 10 amendments in general, just the spirit of it.
Right.
And you look at where these people that wrote that were coming from. They were coming from an oppressive society. Okay. And they said, we need to have the freedom to worship. Not all of these men were Christian.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that people, it is based on biblical principle. However, Thomas Jefferson, for instance, he was not a Christian.
No, he was a deist.
He was a deist. And he, if you look at like the Jeffersonian Bible, it's completely abridged version of just things that he felt are important.
And he took out stuff he didn't like.
Well, he didn't adhere to any of the mumbo jumbo, about Jesus and his miracles and all of this.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean that he didn't have the principles in place in his mind when, he did his part in the framing. Just like Ben Franklin or any of these other dudes, And I think it's silly because everybody say, well, they owned slaves. They did this. I said, of course they did. Right. I mean, this was just, look at the era, look at the time. This was, and so I don't think that's a stable platform to attack the framers on, because we do have, the abolitionist slavery. Creating a constitutional amendment is extraordinarily hard. Very, very difficult to do. So, women's suffrage, for instance, was one, the, civil rights, those types of things. When they become codified in the amendments, their amendments make it happen. Right. Because this is many, many smart people sitting there going, agonizing, you know what? Women do need to have the right to vote. Okay. And I agree with that. I think it's silly that they wouldn't, but unfortunately it had to be put into law, into an amendment. So people would be like, hey, okay, women, you can register to vote too.
Right. Yeah. So you're fine. Well, obviously, as am I with amending the Constitution and adding things that maybe things that have changed over the years, something like that. Something like, when they first founded it, women didn't really have a prominent place in that area, but as we kind of progress as a society and, giving women the right to vote, good step in the right direction. But what about like the things they're doing now when they're trying to amend, you know what I'm saying? Like they're trying to do different things now.
Yeah. So let's look at this for a second from an evolutionary perspective.
Okay.
If we want to use that framing of evolution, evolution is going to state that things get better. Okay.
Right.
So we went from nothing to now.
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't account for entropy or any thermodynamics, any of that type of stuff. It doesn't. Right. So it's a kind of I don't know. It's lame, I guess, but
for lack of a more scientific term,
if we take that though into an inorganic setting, something like the founding of a nation,
right?
Like the United States, we have a creation made by men, just like an automobile, anything. They evolve over time. They get better. They have more function, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we get into the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, all of these things that have been added, this is a positive step in an evolution to create, in my estimation, a better society for people as a whole.
Right.
Yes, I hate the fact that blacks had to go through what they went through for, the decades and centuries that they did. I'm glad that, we are where we are in that. Same with women, children at one time in history were below women in society. They were a burden,
Right.
So I think we can look at that as those are positive Those are positive things that are helping society.
Yeah, but like, so to me and you, we would say yes, but you will find people that will disagree with that.
Well, maybe,
They'll
but here's
say,
the
no, as soon as we let women vote, that's where the country went to crap. And as soon as we let minorities have rights, that's when everything went down. I mean, you know, you have those people out there.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't care about them because it doesn't well, and I'm going to tell you why I don't.
Yeah.
Because their opinions are relevant. Because when they make an amendment, the way that the Supreme Court works, this was fascinating to me. They'll admit there are so many hot button topics out there that they can't get to all of them at once. Mm-hmm. So they'll take one, they'll make judgment on it, and I forget how it works, like it's mapped out through the country where they will take opinion from these areas. And if 51% of opinion is in favor of something, they will act on it. 51%.
Right.
They said that's all we can do is achieve an action for the simple majority. We cannot make the other 49% happy, but we don't have to.
Right.
So 49% of the country hates the fact that black people, have the same rights as everybody else. So what?
Right.
I don't care what you say, because the majority at some point,
right.
And so
you're not saying that's a true statistic now. You're not. I mean, obviously that's much less percentage. It's probably like 1% of the population feels that way at this point.
No, I'm saying at the base of it, at the very fundamental level of how a law is made, the majority is 51%.
Correct.
So if you get 51% of people vote for, an action or a bill or something, well, guess what? If you're in the 49% that didn't, you're just going to have to suffer through it. It's like, yeah, this sucks. I hate this. But the next time it comes around, well, maybe you'll vote. Maybe they'll vote differently. Maybe you will. I don't know.
Right.
So on one hand, I want to say, I want the system to work that way. Right. I want it to be like, yeah, hey, get out and vote. It matters. Does it?
Right.
I don't know. I'm not totally sold on that idea.
Yeah. So, but you like the structure of that system. You like the 51 to 49% way that works. Like, you think that's the right way to go about it. And it doesn't matter what the topic is. Like, is there any topics you would throw in there that you're like, I cannot believe 51% of America wants it this way, but so what?
Well, I think Ryan, we just have to back up for a second and look at the system that we have is what we have, and it's the best we have, and it is what it is. And if unfortunately though, the system is only as good as the people in charge.
Yeah,
and I think now most people will agree that the people we have in charge right now they're insane.
Yeah.
They're absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And now this whole J6 thing comes out and it's like, well, wait a minute. A year and a half ago or whenever it was, I'm the conspiracy theorist.
You talk about the January 6th stuff, you mean?
Yeah, J6. Now they just released all this footage, and it's like, dadgum, man, this is like, and a lot of people are like, we know. We've been saying this. This was the case. And
so what do you mean, though? So just for those that don't know what you're talking about,
so I haven't looked at all of the footage, but there was a theory, or there was a statement made that was quashed at some point, that the people that actually made this movement into the Capitol building were FBI plants. They were basically just this paid or incited group.
Yeah, because there was supposed videos where they were like changing into these clothes with to look like insurrectionists and the whole deal.
So the supposed videos you've just referred to are the ones that have just been released.
Okay.
They
so you're saying
released
that those are true. That is true, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
now, just for everybody's sake, I haven't looked at all the videos, and I just kind of look at it. That's one of those things where I'm happy just being a spectator. Be like,
Right.
well, you know what? Hey, fine. I could go in there and, like everybody else, get on YouTube, get wherever, and dissect these videos and say, look at Pelosi, blah blah blah. You know, to me, that's not a very healthy place for me to be. I'm just kind of like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
what?
because I mean, can we really know anyway? Like, is it?
Nope.
Like, yeah, I get these videos coming out. Even then, part of you's like, yeah, but is that even real? You know, like it's just so hard to jump in with both feet with most of that stuff. You know, it could be. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
But again, though, Ryan, I have to go back, and this is a measure of something that I try to use, and I kind of fall back on it because I think it keeps me somewhat honest in things. Yeah. You go back to the legal system, for instance, and you're on a jury, and you know they seem to have all the evidence against this person, and you're like, man, I'm going to fry this sucker for sure. He's going down. But then on the last day, they present that one thing to you where you're like, oh,
yeah,
shoot,
yeah.
Now, does it have to be conclusive? No, it doesn't. All it has to do is incite reasonable doubt.
Right.
In your mind. And if you're doing your job as a jurist, you would have to say, I can't convict him.
Yeah.
Because there's reasonable doubt.
Yes.
That is what I would hope that an objective jurist would do in a person or in any situation, anywhere. It's just be objective. Just be open to looking at the evidence, looking at these things. Don't make these suppositions about things, and just this is the evidence.
Yeah.
Now, going back to J6, you're looking at the initial reports. These insurrectionists, blah, 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 all of this.
The Trump supporters, the whole deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Gosh, they got them dead to rights. Shoot those bad guys. Fry them. But then when they're saying, no, actually, we have all of the video footage from it, and then it's quashed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Okay. There's your reasonable doubt. Guess what? You're lying to me.
Right.
If you don't want me to see the evidence, the video evidence, if it was that, you know, if you really wanted to sway me, show me the video evidence.
See, and this is what I think is the biggest problem in the country, is that in our age of technology, all this stuff we have for stuff like that. Oh, here's all the video. We have all these video cameras that were set up everywhere. Like, here's the videos of all this stuff. If we could just make it to where everybody in the country, higher ups, civilians, whatever, was not interested in proving their side or trying to have an agenda of any sort. And they were just like, no, let's just look at all the evidence. There would be no problems because because they would be giving you everything that they had at that point. But like you said, if they get to a point like, okay, so we have this video footage, but this part of the video footage is going to go against our agenda. So we better X that out of there. You know, you see it in a lot of George Floyd, perfect example, right? All the actual footage is coming out now, but when it first came out, they showed us just a little bit, and they showed us what was going to promote their agenda, which is that this was a racist white man killing a black man for no reason, right? That's what they wanted you to believe,
right? And
then all this other stuff's coming out later. It's like, oh my gosh, why didn't you show it that to begin with? Well, because it didn't promote your agenda. So I mean, it's such a big deal when the media and the government and all these people are just like, no, we have something we're trying to do. So we have to just put together these slideshows that will just promote what we want. You know? It's just like, no, stop it.
Well, sure.
You know?
I mean, it's all about the narrative.
Right.
And when Michael Flynn, I don't know if you know who he is. He was the general. He was arrested. And then when Trump had him released from prison, I saw an interview with him. And I think at the time I was taking a political science class. This is back when I was still in school. So I was taking this political science class, and He came out though, and I was watching this interview with him, and he basically said something to the effect that the citizen journalist is going to be the people that save this country, because everybody has a phone, everybody has, and they're going 24/7, right?
Right.
You can't swing a dead cat without, 1,300 videos coming up on YouTube of different angles of you doing something. That's just the nature of things. But he said, because the mainstream media is just corrupt.
Yeah.
It's gone. But going back to this for a second, that is not a new problem in this country, because as we established before, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, they were the masters of their time of propaganda.
Yes. I was going to say that's when it started, back before when you mentioned the newspapers.
Yeah. And they were the masters of this propaganda, and they've had 200 and something years to refine this and become very good at it. And people that have power, the last thing they want to do is lose their power.
Right.
So they don't really care what they're going to do, and how it's going to shake out. But when he said that, I'm like, yeah, I think that makes sense. So now you've got, closed circuit television footage of something that happened in the Capitol building. It's kind of like this phenomena about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
He killed himself. Right. And, oh, really? Well, where's the video? Oh, the cameras went down.
Yeah,
Well, now
Amazing.
They have these experts. They're like, not in that place. They didn't.
Right.
Nope. And these are like, no, it's impossible for something like that to happen in that particular wing of that particular facility.
Right.
There's redundancy. There's this suicide watch, because apparently he had tried to kill himself one previous time and they stopped him.
Right. Well, and that's what they said, right? They said that there was a reason why he was on suicide watch to begin with, obviously. But that
just shows you the level of like, oh, wait, he attempted it and you were able to stop him then. But now that's your reasoning for supporting this idea that somehow the cameras went down and he's hung himself in this thing.
Well, wasn't there something that came out a while back? And again, I didn't look into this to check the validity of it, but there was something where supposedly one of those guards that was on the suicide watch, I thought he said something about that somebody paid them to do something or other, or to turn something off, or to like, you know what I mean? Like it was to there was some kind of thing going on there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's just kind of one of those things where that's a rabbit hole I'm just not willing to go down. And
because are you ever going to get to the bottom of it is really the question.
No, and it's a big distraction.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the southern border issue right now. It's just like, and it's not a new issue, right? This has been happening, since Trump was in, and, it's like, why that? Right. Well, for sure. But it's like, what's going on? Well, why do they want us looking south? That's where I go in my mind. It's like, well, what's happening up north? Well, guess what's happening? Yeah. Guess what's happening up north? You got Trudeau up here in Canada just doing a bunch of whack stuff. They're shutting people's bank accounts, all of this stuff.
Yeah, it's getting crazy up there with that's a place where we're talking about freedom. That's getting jacked in a lot of ways up there. You mean going to the pastors that are getting arrested for having services and that whole deal.
But I think at the core level of it, though, you have to look at their structure, their governmental structure to begin with.
Right.
They are a socialist society.
Sure.
I guess define like sort of like England and those types of places.
Right.
But maybe more socialist. And are they true? I don't know. But it's just kind of one of those things. Well, they don't have the freedom that we have. They don't have the assurance of our freedom that we have in this country. And I think that's where it is kind of funny, because when you talk about things like the truckers, you talk about things like they're happening up in Canada, like the gun thing and all of that. Americans' first reaction, that's against your rights. Whoa, hold up.
Yeah.
They don't have those rights.
Right.
You have those rights here as Americans. Pay attention to what's happening here. And because, and again, I would hope that going back to this idea of defending your right under these amendments is important to me, because I want to protect my rights. It's a slippery slope. If I let them take your freedom of speech, guess what? Now I am going to be limited in my freedom of speech. And then it's just a matter of time. They'll just wipe all the way through the 10 amendments and you'll be done.
Right.
And that's what they're trying to do. Like, they like attacking the Second Amendment. They like attacking the First Amendment, all of these different, all of the core things.
Right.
You know?
So where do you think, so this is something I was going to ask you too, but this kind of goes into what you just said. What I was just going to say was how far do you think that's going to go with them trying to attack those amendments and trying to get rid of these things? And then what I want to talk about too is, you lived in California most of your life. And then in the last couple of years, you moved to Idaho, which is obviously much more conservative than California, right? In a lot of ways. So I was going to ask you, first of all, what do you think? I guess it's two questions. So the first one would be, as they in California and other places that they're really trying to attack those, Second Amendment rights and those kind of things, or any of the amendments. Do you ever see it actually happening to where those amendments get removed, or we actually lose things like that?
I don't think, for me personally, that it needs to even go that far. Mm-hmm. And so I want to back up for a second. I was born and raised in Santa Barbara. Okay. And but I left as soon as I could. And so I was gone for the majority of my adult years, and then of course came back. Yeah, I've lived all over the country. I had a ranch in Colorado for a long time, and so I've done lived in a number of different places and done a number of different things. And I think for me that just the where it goes too far is when you start having a conversation about limiting people's rights. That's the line for me. Don't even go there. Mm-hmm. So, you invoke the children. Well, we got to keep our kids safe. You're stupid. If you think that giving up your rights are somehow going to magically protect your children even more, you're friggin' brainwashed.
Like, man. What do you mean by, you're talking about gun rights specifically there with that example?
Yeah, specifically. Mm-hmm. So I lived years ago in Elko, Nevada. Elko is in Elko County. It was at the time, it was the 9th largest county in the United States. Mm. Everybody carried guns. As a matter of fact, I went into a gun store with my friend one day, and that same gun store, they sold gold pans. And we were going to go up into the Ruby Mountains, and we were going to prospect up there in the Ruby Mountains. Mm-hmm. And there was a cop standing in there at the corner, talking to the gun shop owner. Mm-hmm. And we're like buying vials to put our gold in and all this stuff. And I said, yeah, we're just going to go up here into the mountains. And the cop looks at me and goes, well, do you have a gun? And I'm like, no. He goes, you need to take a gun up there. I'm like, oh, well, what do you suggest? He looks down on the thing. He goes, that's something like that. The dude hands me the gun. I pay him. The cop? Put it in the guy that was owning it.
In the gun store. Okay, gotcha.
So my point is, I just bought the gun right there. Yeah. I had a Nevada ID. I'm like, yeah, here. And we go up in the mountains. And but my point in bringing up Elko County is that they had not had a homicide in that county for 7 years. Mm. It was the 9th largest county in the country. They had now, population wise, I'm not sure how big it was, but the point is they did not have a homicide in that county for 7 years. Mm. And they attributed that to the fact everybody's armed. It's a polite society.
Right.
You don't have to necessarily see guns hanging all over people and all of this stuff. Just assume that your neighbor has a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And so we live in a community like that now, where I've had conversations with people and they say, gosh, I figured when I'd come to Idaho, it would be like the Wild West. Right. There'd be guns everywhere. And, you know, I'm like, well, I said, it isn't. And they do. Everybody up here carries a gun.
Yeah.
And they're like, really? And we don't see it. And I said, well, that's the point.
Right.
You're not supposed to see them. But just assume that your neighbor has a gun. Mm-hmm. So we've gotten to know our neighbors around here. Everybody carries guns.
Right.
And it's just one of those things where it's like, listen, I watch out for you. You watch out for me. It's a nice, safe kind of community. It's not threatening in any way. It's not this. Right. They put armed guards at our church that we go to. They have a security force.
Really?
They're all in civilian clothes and everything, but they're all former cops, first responders, like they have. But here's the thing. And the reason there's a good reason they do this is because the pastor of our church made, his warning is, listen, he goes, just because you live up here in Idaho doesn't mean you don't have a target on your back. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, you have a larger target on your back. And he's not doing it to incite any kind of fear. Mm-hmm. He's just saying there's people here that wish to do our values on our belief system harm. Mm-hmm. And they'll go to any lengths to do it. And they've had violent episodes, not at my church, but in other places.
Right.
There's violence. There's this. When people come to our church for the first time and they kind of are introduced to the idea that there is a security team, there's mm-hmm. other teams in place, and they are armed. It's being armed is like voluntary. You don't have to carry a gun to be on the security team. Mm-hmm. I would say this, though. Everybody that I know on the security team carries a firearm, and they're all trained. They're right. either, cops, former cops, or they're well trained in the use of these things.
Which is important, right? That's an important aspect of it. You don't want some bozos who's never even shot a gun to be having one for security.
Right. And it wouldn't be allowed. But my right. point in it is when you have somebody coming in and you make mention of that just in conversation, I've never had anybody like wig out and roll their eyes. They're like, oh, that's good. That's good. I'm glad. I'm glad they do. Because there is this instilled fear in them that they've come from California. They've come from these, they're taking the guns, and people will say, well, no, they're not. Okay, well, listen, you have this firearm over here. Can you get ammunition for it? Well, no.
Yeah.
Well, they don't have to take your gun. They take your bullets.
Right.
They take ammunition for it. They make it hard. There's supply chain issues. There's all this stuff. And that hit us up here too.
Well, but I mean, when you mentioned that just now, that your church actually has armed security, that was kind of shocking to me, because I've never, and you think living in California, I mean, maybe it's just me. I don't know the statistics on this, but when I think in my own head, what's a more likely place for a church to get shot up, or a place like that, California or Idaho? And I would think California. I would think that's probably more common. But I've never been to a church here that has armed security. But and we're not carrying weapons. You'd think that a place where most of the congregation is carrying weapons or carrying guns, that they wouldn't need armed security, because that's the whole argument for gun rights, right? Is they say if you remove all the guns from the civilians, then all that's going to mean is the criminals are going to know, oh, you're not armed, I have a better chance of taking you out. To where if you just, like you were just saying a minute ago, even though you can't see all the guns that people have, just the fact that that most of them are carrying is enough to deter you and think, okay, I'm not going to get into it with that guy. I'm not going to try to rob that guy, because chances are he's going to pull his gun out and shoot me.
Yeah. And I think ultimately that's the goal, Ryan. I don't want to get into a gunfight with somebody.
No,
I don't want to have to take somebody's life, but I don't want to be caught short.
Yes.
And it wouldn't necessarily be protecting myself, but it's going to be the protection of my family or my friends or my fellow believers, and these things being prepared.
Right.
It's like if I invite you over for chicken dinner, I'm not going to hand you raw chicken.
Right.
I'm going to create a meal for you and make sure that it's as healthy as possible. And hey, God bless you. I hope it was a blessing to you. Type of thing.
When's that happening, by the way? Let's get that going, man.
I know, man. I'll even kill you one of my chickens over here.
There you go, man. You'll prepare the fatted calf for me when I finally get up that area.
The fatted calf, But no, and I think that the long and the short of it is, I think I'm more heartbroken over the state of the country than anything. Okay. I'm kind of in that grieving process. I get. Yeah. And it's been years, 30 years.
But do you feel like you're in a better place for you and your family as far as that goes, being in Idaho as opposed to California?
I do, because up here, the prevailing kind of way of life is I may disagree with you, but I'm okay with disagreeing with you. Right. We're not going to fight over it.
And most people have that attitude up there?
Yeah. Okay. So COVID, for instance, is obviously, we're on the third year of flattening the curve, something like that. And but do you remember, Ryan, when we first moved up here in November of 2020, and I sent you that picture of that artwork and that, and you're like, wait, they're open?
Yeah.
It's like they're open up here.
Yeah.
But now I will say this. If we did go to some place and they said, can you please wear a mask? Okay. I will.
Sure.
If you ask me to in that vein,
right,
I will. But if you're making it some requirement because you've bought into some kind of mandate that was never a mandate and you just want to virtue signal and be on the cutting edge of modern, air quotes, science.
Yeah.
No, I will not. I'm not going to play into your delusions. Yeah. To me, it's as crippled as this gender ideology.
Right. No. Well, I was going to say that's two things I remember about you moving. Well, maybe this one was before you moved with the COVID, but I remember you telling me, I was like, oh, is anybody, you guys had COVID yet or whatever? And you said something like, no, but I got some pretty good allergies that keep people pretty far away from me in the grocery store. But then you bring up the gender ideology. I remember when you first moved up there too, you said, man, and I've told so many people this story because it cracks me up, even though I don't always use your name because I don't know who you are. But I said, yeah, a friend of mine moved up to Idaho and he goes, Ryan, man, you're not going to believe it up here. It's the weirdest thing. There's only two genders up here. I'm like, get out of town.
And they openly talk about it, and it's like, you boy, girl, this and that. And I think what it is, though, is you have a very large LDS community up here. So they're the conservative. Sure. Now, there are some variances within that movement, but more fundamentalist or more liberal, I would imagine, just like anything else. But sure. But I do want to kind of say this just for the sake of the people that are listening. Yeah. That doesn't mean we're immune to that. Like Boise is kind of a liberal hotspot, and then up north, up here in Moscow, that's kind of a liberal.
Moscow, that's way north. Russia, that's way
no, just up here. It's actually makes sense. Okay, it's in the Pacific time zone, right? Okay, so I lump that all in with California. I think it's on the Pacific time zone, but no, there are these liberal sort of where the schools are, and that's where the gender, the progressive movement, the gender ideology, these things, and you'll see folks around town. Julie just had a conversation with a girl at Albertsons the other day who thought her hair was was like a bright blue and all of this, and Ava was wearing a Bluey shirt.
The dog,
Bluey,
yeah.
And
good show.
This girl made some kind of comment about, I love that show. most people don't know, but Bluey's a girl, and blah, blah, blah. And Julie's looking at her like, huh, did you know that the dog on Blue's Clues is a girl too? And the girl's like, huh? Yeah, it's not a new thing.
Right.
Type of thing.
Right.
And this girl just kind of like had to like stifle her thing. And Julie wasn't doing it to be mean to her or anything. Right. It's just kind of like, keep your opinions out of this conversation here. I'm not coming to an Albertsons to get proselytized into whatever your ideology is.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's end on this then for political part. Because this is fascinating to me. I want to just kind of quickly get your take on this. Because you mentioned like Boise being kind of the college town, and that's kind of where the liberal activity is. That's where a lot of the progressive stuff is, which is true in every state, by the way. I mean, it's even in somewhere like California, which is a very, very blue state, very, very liberal. Yeah, you get like in the eastern parts of California, there's a lot of conservative believers here. But it's all the big cities and the college towns. That's where all that is happening. So why do you think that it's that age demographic that tends to be the highest on the list of the progressives?
Well, I think to answer that, we have to go back a little ways. It's not a new thing. I mean, you go way back, hundreds of years, into, what is it? The Middle Ages, kind of the Dark Ages, those types of things, where there was this Age of Enlightenment, I guess, where they're like, oh, it's this new way of thinking. It's this departure from God. Right. We don't no longer need a deity. We're our own, we're the captains of our own destiny type of thing. And I think that made its way into the United States, specifically probably after like the industrial age. And then you get into the age of consumption back in the 50s, where it became very, object oriented, things. We need stuff, so people were consuming, right? That's the idea behind that. And so it became more about me,
self-centered stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then it became, let's give them credit so they can get more stuff for themselves. And then they become almost these, I call it economic colonialism. They will give you all the money that you want, on their terms, of course, and then you're going to spend the rest of your life paying this back. But I'm getting stuff. It's all about me. Right. So it was a distraction, right? Right. But I think where things became very telling was, I don't remember the gentleman's name. Joe Rogan just did a thing on him. I think it was fairly recently. I've known about this video for a long time. There was a KGB defector. I forget his name. He defected. This was back in the 80s. And he was very clear in what he was saying. He goes, the communists will take the United States without ever breaching its borders, firing a rifle. We will take, and all it will take is one generation. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to get into the schools. We're going to change ideology. We are going to brainwash, essentially, just to paraphrase, that generation of children. He goes, all we need to take this country is 15 years. Now, he said that in the 80s. So now we're looking at 30 plus years. Right. And so now you've got double this. Yeah. So now you have that generation, this generation, and I don't know, I think that interestingly enough, I think though there's a gap in there, Ryan, where a lot of people, and I know people bag on millennials, but I think that there is a portion of millennials that are actually waking up and they're starting to revert back to a more reasonable way of thinking. Like they're waking up and they're saying, no. There has to be some fundamental truth in these things that we've been told are wrong, like the idea that there needs to be a God or anything like this, or the prevalence of evolutionary theory being taught as fact in school. It's like,
right.
That type of thing. And people are like, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Because they've slipped out of the chokehold that these institutions have had on them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the institutions, they need to double down. They need to say, well, gosh, that didn't work. So let's change our tactic here. And now we're going to throw in gender stuff.
Right.
We're going to create a new science. And I think for his part, Fauci really opened the door for a lot of this, because he's trying to push people in based on the science, right? It became this almost this, gosh, it's almost this religion, the science. Gosh, if you're not following the science, and it was always the science.
Right.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. And I've had conversations with people recently about the vaccine. I'm like, no, I followed science, and it just kind of talked me out of having to have this.
Right, exactly.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I can use the same argument about gun rights, for instance. I've had people say, well, this statistic and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But the science isn't backing up your position.
Right.
And they go, what do you mean? I'm like, because your statistics aren't correct.
Right.
You're not using true science. And what's interesting to me, Ryan, is when I was in school, I studied sociology, which ironically I think it's kind of funny. Karl Marx was the father of modern sociology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sociology is one of the most fascinating topics that I've ever studied. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And now I know the roots of it, but there are certain things in it. But when I started studying it, and I started looking at, well, what does a sociologist do? And I remember in Sociology 101, we had to study science, and we had to study the scientific process. And at the core of it is objectivity. You have to, as a scientist, you have to remain objective, and so you have your thesis, and then you're either proving or disproving it based on evidence.
Yeah.
So guess what? Science is science, and I support science. I really do. And so I would say, but this is a hang up of me. I had to look at that and say, Ian, are you the type of person that would make a good scientist? And my honest answer was no, because I have a very hard time being objective in a lot of scenarios, because I come in with preconceived ideas, and it's something I've struggled with, and I've grown out of that, in recent years, especially in the realm of theology and things like that. But, but anyway, kind of going back to this whole thing, they've just doubled down on the stupidity. What is the most outlandish thing that we can put out there?
Right.
Oh, men can have babies. No, they can't.
Yeah.
No, they can't. What's that based on? Well, my feelings.
Yeah.
I feel entitled. I feel this. But what's even more amazing to me is why a company like Anheuser-Busch would create corporate suicide by backing somebody like Dylan Mulvaney.
But did they think they were doing that, though? I don't think they did. I think they were surprised by the backlash.
I don't know about that, because if you listen to a lot of the other analysts, and they really kind of came out with an educational piece on how corporate funding and all of these things happen, the backers of these. So they were, is it Blackwater, I think, or there's some others. These are the money behind these companies. They want to push this agenda. So they're taking them. So at first they thought Anheuser-Busch was just going to lose a few $1 million. Then it turned into billions. And I don't think that they were really expecting that. But they stood to say they were going to lose $7 or $8 million, but they were going to stand to make 30, 40, $50 million of promised funding for them backing. Whatever. And those are just arbitrary numbers. There's no fact on those. But that's sort of the the mechanism behind that. So to your question, I doubt they thought they were going to lose. I lost track.
No, well,
it was like a daily.
It makes no sense to me. I mean, obviously, I'm not a CEO of any kind, but if I was, I'm not getting involved in any of that stuff, because no matter which way you go with it, let's say Anheuser-Busch would have endorsed a person who was anti-trans. You would have had the same scenario. You would have had half of your audience said, we're not buying your beer anymore because you're this, or just stay out of the political realm. I mean, like, just make beer and let people drink it. And if they like your beer, they'll buy your beer. You know, it's simple.
I agree with you on that point. However, I do disagree with one thing you said. It would be nowhere near half, because I think what we're dealing with here is a fraction of a percent of society is really who they're pandering to.
Pro-trans, you talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's that's where I'm kind of like, so if you look at this mainstream media, for instance, they would have us all believe that Dylan Mulvaney is just so important to society and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, he's not. And not just, and he's not because.
She's not, Ian. She's not. Get it right, man.
My apologies.
Respect the pronouns, buddy.
Yeah. But, he's not that. He's not that. And none of them are.
Right.
None of them are. And this is one of the phenomena about things like social media and stuff. You can gaslight people. You can gaslight people in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the cool things about Elon taking over Twitter.
Yeah.
And I like him. I don't agree with everything that he says or does. I just don't. But at the core of it, he's saying, listen, grow a thicker skin, because these people are going to be able to have a platform to say what they want to say. You can say what you're going to say.
Right.
And it just happens to be coincidence a lot of times where he kind of falls down, and it only comes down. He's a smart dude. So he's kind of looking at everything and going, you're dumb.
Yeah.
This is a dumb thing that you're saying.
Right.
Not even from any belief system or any, just objectively he's looking at it and going, it is stupid for you to say that men can have babies.
Yes.
It is a dumb thing to say.
Yeah.
And but you look at it, how do they attack him? Well, this and that is like, dude, he is literally a rocket scientist.
Yeah. They don't attack him with knowledge and science. They don't attack him with that when he makes a statement like that, because they can't.
Well, he's a hater. They put him in the same bucket as Trump, right?
Yes.
And Trump's an anomaly to me. I did vote for him, but because Clinton is no good now, and it was. But would I vote for him again? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that there's probably better people out there. I think that he is good. I think Trump is good as an ideal. Mm-hmm. I think that he really captures the ideal of that movement. I think that, but would he be the most productive person to have in that office again post Biden? I don't know, because I really don't think so, only because we'd have more riots, we'd have more killings, we'd have all of these. It would be, another.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I'm a big fan of Ron DeSantis. That's my boy right there. But
and I agree. I think Ron's cool.
Yeah.
There's others too that I think are great.
Yeah, I think Vivek Ramaswamy has some really cool things to say. I mean, I don't agree with everything he has to say, but
I don't think you can. And I would just put this out there. If you agree with everything that somebody says,
you
better
check yourself.
Yeah, I
you
agree
wreck
with
yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, let's jump into some spiritual stuff. As obviously you and I, you're probably one of the 5 people in my life right now that I talk to about this the most anyway. So I know you and I have had many, many discussions about these kinds of things. But I was hoping before we get into some of the I do want to get a lot into some of the technical issues of like church and Christianity and that kind of stuff, just because you're like me with that. But I do want you to just kind of give a brief, like, kind of like a testimonial, just kind of like, because obviously you weren't a Christian as a child, you know, per se. You went through lots of different things to bring you to where you were. So let's start there.
Yeah. I think so. As a child, I grew up, and my grandmother was a nurse during World War II. And so there was a large group of women nurses that came out and then went into the civilian sector. So she had a core group of friends that including one of her sisters, they were nurses. And one of the ladies, her name was Ruth Jorgensen. And I was very young, but Ruth would take my sister and I to church, and it was a Lutheran church. But I really remember one thing I really appreciated about the Lutheran church was sort of the liturgy, right? I like that type of stuff. But they would, they'd do the Palm Sunday, and it was literally, here's the Palm Sunday with the palm leaves and all of this stuff. So I understood very early who Jesus was. I didn't really understand the true gospel story. I knew he was there. He died. I definitely knew he died on the cross. I just didn't know why. I didn't know why I needed it.
Right.
So that was from a young age. And then I went through Awana. And then somewhere around 13 or so, I remember I gave my life to Christ. And but then I was a whole departure.
Right.
Probably up into my 40s anyway, where I just never really grasped, like there would be pockets in there where I'd be with, have an acquaintance or a friend that was really into scripture, and we could have some meaningful discussions, but I took my own understanding of it, and basically just sort of bulldozed things. But I loved listening to Christian radio, and I didn't know why. I liked listening to people like
talk
Alistair.
Radio or like music?
Like sermon stuff.
Okay.
Like I loved listening to the Bible and sermon. And I think one of the more attractive things for a program to me was there was an intellectual process to it where, there was a question asked, there was an answer given.
Right.
And I appreciated that dialogue. But, of course, guys like Alistair Bigg and a lot of the Chuck Swindoll, the mainstays of Christian radio.
Right.
I'd listen to them. Again, though, it was detached from me in the sense that yes, I'm in this, I'm in the circle, because I believe in Jesus type thing. And, but
hang on. So did you kind of hold that from when you were 13 to just kind of like, almost like believing, well, I already did that. I'm already that thing that we call Christian.
Yeah.
So if you're hearing anything about anything else, you're like, well, no, I'm already there kind of deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think so. And I was really kind of more, I've arrived. I don't really, this is interesting to me, but I almost internalized the information that they were giving me to weaponize against other people. You're wrong because of this, you're wrong because of that. And so there was no care or love or grace or anything involved in any of this. It was just, something to bludgeon somebody over the head with. And, so I was very self-righteous in that sort of sense. And, but then, I know this and Mark and others, but, given my lifestyle as just a raging alcoholic through that time, well, God's going to show you, oh, you think you're righteous. You think you are this thing. I'm going to show you what you are. And he basically just stripped everything away. And it was at that point where I became very, I guess, reflective on my life, but not to the point of self-loathing. It was more like hopeful. You were this. in Christ, you were this. Now you are this in Christ. Start acting this way.
Right.
And it was a wake-up call for me, saying there is no room for this within a believer's life. Now, why the Lord allowed me to go those many years that way, I don't know. I harbor a lot of regrets from that time, but I wouldn't change it. I just feel bad.
Yeah.
It's like, I wish in a lot of, I would have handled things differently.
Right.
In a lot of cases, but I think that that's one of those things the Lord lets me hang on to kind of keep me honest.
Yeah.
In the way that I approach things.
Right. Well, plus, would you have learned all the things you learned if you didn't go that road?
No. And I think that that's something for me that I reflect on. It's like, well, the Lord, clearly allowed me to move down this particular path in my life of just self-involvement and complete. I mean, I honestly though, Ryan, there were times where I'm like, well, I must be living right because nothing bad happens to me.
Yeah.
I lived a charmed life, and I think it's one of those deceptive things that people fall into where it's like, the devil's done with you.
Right.
He doesn't have to do anything to you because you've done it to yourself. And now the flip side of that, though, that when the Lord reins you back in, and you start falling under the conviction of the Spirit, it's like, oh, okay.
Right.
But those tools that you picked up along the way, that edge, that personality, those types of things, those aren't wiped out. I think that those are the things that the Lord uses as your strengths.
Right.
Because it makes you, it hones you into the tool that you're going to use. I think of the Apostle Paul.
Mm-hmm.
The Apostle Paul, for instance, he was a Pharisee of Pharisees. We know he was a righteous man in the eye, in not only his own eyes, but in the eyes of the law. People would look to him and they say, man, what a great man.
Yeah.
But then he has an interaction with the living Christ, and it's like, okay. Now, would he have been as effective as the apostle after this thing with Christ? Of course, the Holy Spirit needs to take a lot of credit in that too.
Well, of course, but Paul's personality and everything.
But his personality, man, I'm going to drive it home. You can imagine he is delivering the gospel message with the same fervor that he was wanting to stone Stephen, that he was wanting to kill these, because truly in his mind, and I think he came by it honest, these were the enemy of God. These were the blasphemous. These are blasphemous ways of thinking.
Right.
What's interesting to me about the Apostle Paul is, though, he didn't seem to have, and I don't know, this is just when I picture Paul, he didn't seem to have the same type of hang-ups as other Pharisees had. Like if I think about like Nicodemus is really cool. Then you have Joseph Arimathea, these wealthy men that I love to think they've came to faith and they are saved and they are in heaven. But the rest of them, the ones that, would try to battle Jesus, in the synagogues and these things, would trap him into these words. I think Paul was above that.
Right.
I think Paul was different. He was an action person.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of hold to what you're saying too, is that I think obviously everything spiritual that takes place is all the work of God and the Holy Spirit and the whole deal. But I think there's a reason God chooses certain people to do certain things, right? Yeah. It's based on, like we were talking earlier about street evangelism or street preaching and that kind of thing. Some people are just called into that. And I think it's because they have a certain knack for it, and God will use their talents, for lack of a better word, for his glory. The glory still all goes back to him, because if any of those people get saved during that evangelism, it's all God, right? It's not that person, but like he'll put that hunger and that fire in a person's heart for evangelism or for being a missionary. Or that's why I don't like all these churches that are like, oh, if you're a Christian, you better get on the mission field. No. That's not the way that works. Not everybody's called into the mission field. That's not the way it goes,
Yeah. But I think in that statement, though, we have to, I would ask, well, define the mission field. because,
Yes.
are you talking
Yes.
about like Africa? Are you talking
Right.
about,
or
the
your neighbor,
Philippines? Or are
Right.
you talking about something local, like
your
your neighbor?
workplace,
Sure.
exactly.
And to that end, I think that, yeah, okay, you're right. I think that we all have a responsibility at a minimum to live above reproach in the standard that would be befitting a follower of Christ. And,
Right.
Again, though, that goes back to it's only because of him and because of the Spirit that we have the ability to live that way in a world that is fallen and, obviously corrupt.
Right.
So, yeah. But I do understand what you're saying about just kind of broad brushing everybody that claims the name of Jesus. Well, what's the next steps? What's the next step? Well, go to the mission field. What does that mean?
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Right.
I think it's, and, going back to street evangelism, like I said, I've tried that and I'm just not me. Now, do I feel bad about that? No, I think there was a time where I kind of did, where I'm like, oh gosh, I haven't arrived yet, or I'm not there yet, So there was a little bit of, strain for me. But
well, it's probably because so many other Christians make you feel like you're supposed to be doing that, and if you're not, or if you feel like you try and it just doesn't work, you feel like there's something wrong with you. Like, oh, the Lord must not love me as much as this guy, or maybe I'm not even a Christian because I don't have the hunger for this or desire, or when I do try to do it, nothing happens. I just get people that, are angry at me or they laugh at me or whatever,
Right. And you made that statement there. Well, maybe I'm not a Christian. And I would say that if that question pops into your mind, you are a Christian, because it's like the insane person doesn't know they're insane.
Right.
Right. So why would you care?
Right.
If you're not a Christian, why would you even care?
Right.
Because it's not your personal, it's not you, it's not your heart, your, raw, human beingness that is convicting you. It's the Spirit of God that's convicting you.
Yeah. So would you say then that it's impossible for I shouldn't say impossible. So do you think that every time a person questions their salvation, that's proof that they're probably saved?
I would say that question comes from the enemy.
Okay.
I don't think that it comes from this. Why would the Spirit of God say that to you?
Well, I mean, take an actual non-believer, right? The Holy Spirit convicts them of their sin and brings them into repentance and brings them into the fold, right? So what would be any different than a person who, say, goes to church their whole life, has been told they're a Christian because they did some action or whatever? Why wouldn't the Holy Spirit convict that person and say, hey, just so you know, you don't have me. You need to be saved.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I get what you're saying. Again, though, I mean, that's a tough one, Ryan, because I don't think you could take the broad brush, those scenarios. I mean, like you take my life, for instance, and I would have sworn up and down for 30 years, yeah, definitely.
Right.
Now, in one sense, is true. I mean, I had a very deep conviction, a very deep belief, a core belief that Jesus was important. Now, did I understand? And it wasn't just it to me. It transcended an intellectual understanding. There was something even at the depths of my depravity that I know. And that at the end, Ryan, is what gave me hope.
Right.
When you talk about being really, really dark, really in really crazy places, and then all of a sudden a light is like, this is what I need. And it isn't this unattainable thing. It's like, here, take it. And so let's go back
to that in your story then. So did all that kind of happen at the same time? Did you you hit rock bottom is what you were talking about with your alcoholism and that whole deal. So did you coming out of alcoholism and kind of kind of seeing the Lord in a different way, maybe, or however you want to word it, like renewing that relationship with him, and like, because your whole life was obviously put on a different trajectory at some point, because you're not the same person now that you were however long ago that was when you were steeped in your alcoholism and everything else. So was that all kind of around the same time? Like you just had this great awakening where everything just kind of changed?
Yeah, it was within probably 5 minutes.
Okay.
But
you were in the darkest of dark places before that 5 minutes happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we could get into a whole other discussion about alcoholism and just the insidious nature of addiction in general. But I think if you wanted to refine it down to that one point of no return, there's a choice. There's always a choice. There's a point of no return. Yeah. And it was in that moment, I remember saying, I need to call somebody. Okay. So I called that person. So I made that came to me. I need to call this person. I called that person. The next thing I know, I am in the emergency room at a hospital, and then I'm in a detox center. Okay. And at the time, I was an avid reader. I would read novels, and I could read, James Patterson novel, for instance, in like a night. I would just read and read and read and read and read and read. Right. And I get to this detox center, and I took a book with me. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to read this book. This is what I'm going to do here. I never touched that book. And the first night I couldn't sleep. Now I'm detoxing from alcohol, and it's not fun. And I'm glad this time it was medical. So, I mean, there's some safety involved there. I'd done it previously, not medically. And those were the scariest times. I almost died a few times. And it's a very scary thing. But it's still not enough to wake you up. It's still not enough. Yeah. And, you talk about like, oh, I'll do this under my own steam and stuff. No, that doesn't work. It does not work, because your steam, your power can fail you. And when it fails you, then you go into another period of self-loathing. Oh, I'm not. This is a sick cycle of things, right? But when the Lord got a hold of you and takes you to this place, he's orchestrating everything. This detox center cost a bunch of money that was paid, and I don't know who paid for it. But they paid for it. To this day? To this day, I don't know who paid for it. And so I'm laying there, and I remember the first night, one of the things that happens to you is you can't sleep because you're coming off of an alcohol that completely takes over your system. So you're struggling to sleep. It's like, I don't have the alcohol that usually causes me to sleep, blah, blah, blah. So I'm laying there. The first night, I'm just laying there, and I would wake, like 3 a.m, maybe I'd doze off for a little bit. And then, of course, they wake everybody up, and I would just be super tired. Second night, same thing. It's like, but the whole time I'm thinking about God. God's talking to me. Wow. And the third night, I'm laying there, and this is where I made the decision. I said, okay, because then now this whole time they said, hey, you need to go to a program. And I said, I'm okay with going to a program. Still in my mind, I'm okay going with a program, but I don't want any of that new age mumbo jumbo garbage. I don't want a psychology. Right. And they said, well, you apply for the rescue mission. And I'm like, well, what's that? And they're like, it's just Christian. I'm like, okay. Well, that night I'm laying there. I was thinking about this. I'm like, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And I remember the second that I said, you know what, I'm going to apply for that. I went to sleep and woke up feeling completely refreshed. Like the burden was just lifted off me. I applied, and I went to the mission, and it was still like 30 days, man, where it's just in this fog, but I could recognize something's different here. I'm safe. And at that point, I can say this as my personal experience. Other people have different experiences with it. Drinking was no longer an option in my life. Yeah. It was done. Completely just delivered from my line of thinking to this day. It's not even an option. I don't even think about it. when I get upset or when I get, quote unquote triggered, it's like, you know what? There's other things I can do,
Right.
So that's where I really started to become involved and invested in participating in learning the Word of God and
right.
Wanting to learn it.
Yeah.
And
so in hindsight, do you see that all as like the Lord, like even from the moment, like you said, you had that decision to make to join a program, and as soon as you signed up for the rescue mission, you felt this burden release. It's almost like the Lord was persuading you to make that decision, and as soon as you did, it was like, okay, great.
I wouldn't say that I didn't feel persuaded. I felt they were presented to me.
Okay.
There was an anxiety about it because I'm like, well, what am I going to do this? This is going to be such I'm 40 something years old, man. Yeah. And I'm like, this is weird, man.
I mean like persuaded by God, like an inner thing you might not even been aware of. At the time,
yeah. It's like how
pushing you a certain direction.
Well, sure. I mean, it was presented to me. It's like, I'm objecting to this. Oh, but there's this option.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, what's that? Then I talked to somebody else that was in there with me. They're like, yeah, I've been through this and it's cool. This is what they do. And so there were people and things in place to feed the positivity that was in this prospect.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, the anxiety was lifted, and it brought me back. And because was in no position to make a rational decision for myself.
Right.
But the Lord, I don't know. Yeah. Like persuaded, prompted, presented, hey, here's this idea.
Yeah.
One thing I did know though, is that I was done. I had nothing left. I was at you talk about just being completely stripped down. I was out of options.
Right.
So now I don't want that to sound like, hey, I went to God because he was the last of, he was my only option. Yeah. But in some ways, he was my only option left.
Yeah. And because if I would have had wrong with that necessarily.
Right. Yeah. But I didn't want to say I latched onto him in a meaningless form of desperation. It was more of he has the answer for me. I don't know what that looks like. He's here to help me. This is here to harm me. Right. And so I needed to go from the harm to the help, and really kind of just jumped into it. Now, as I started developing more of an understanding of the gospel and more understanding, who Jesus is, and being reacquainted with the cross, being reacquainted with these types of things in a meaningful way.
Right.
Not in a way where I was cataloging these and categorizing these things as weapons that I could use against somebody later who I disagreed with.
Mm-hmm.
Internalizing that kind of process. It's like, okay, he's here for me. It's a very personal thing. I felt that care. I felt that he loves me.
Yeah.
And this is one of the statements. I mean, now, why? Well, I don't know, Ryan. I mean, was it because from when I was a kid, I remember when I was a kid, it was a very real, like, it wasn't just like, I'm going to say this to pacify a youth leader or whatever. No,
right.
God was very, very real, but I don't think that I really appreciated what that meant.
Yeah.
I was young, and so
it just means you were one of the elect.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. But I do think that I would say this, though. I do think that God, so my journey from 13 to 41, I think I was, the Lord had me there. Mm-hmm. He'd never turned. See, that's the thing. He never turned his back on me.
No.
And I think that, hey, you think you're that? Well, I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
And that's how the Lord deals with me personally. And I try to be very sensitive to that. I try to be like, I don't want to push it.
Yeah.
I need to get out of this mindset because the Lord is I don't want to be smitten or smoked.
Right. Smitten.
Smitten. And
so at what point, so I know, is that around the time where Julie came into, I mean, I know I've heard you guys talk before, and I know you and Julie knew each other when you were kids, right? Like you guys went to school, or you knew each other from school, but was it around that time that she came back into your life as a love interest? Or, I mean, like, when did that take place?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things that happened to me during my time at the mission was the Lord started bringing up memories to me of people that had a positive impact in my young life, like Ruth, like my friend Mark Gordonier. He was a youth leader.
Yeah.
Such a sweet dude, man. I mean, really, really just had a very big impact on my life, even though he didn't know. So I was looking for him, and I ran into, so I used to be in Awana, like I mentioned. Well, Julie's parents were the commanders of that Awana group. So I went to Awana. Okay. I went to Awana with Julie, Brian, Matt, Mike, their other brother.
Yeah.
Joanna and Brian weren't born yet. So they're 14 years younger than us. Yeah. I think 14 or 15. And then, of course, Awana ends, get into high school. I'm doing high school kid things. And then I go into the Army. I live my life. I do all this crazy stuff. And I was just thinking the other day, it's like, man, I'm all like on my third life or fourth life. I mean, I've lived a lot. I mean, things come up in memories where it's like, man, that was a long time ago. Or I just, I had a 25-year anniversary with one of my really close friends. Like, I can't believe it's been 25 years. Yeah. I said, I remember it like it was yesterday type thing. But yes. And then, so I was trying to find Mark Gordonier. I just felt like, hey, I need to make a connection with this guy because I'm remembering his love and his care and the grace. This dude was a strong believer, and he exuded that character that I didn't recognize until I was in the mission. And I said, man, this was God's person was there. These people that he had in my life were caring and loving and just really kind of. Yeah. So I was looking. And I was looking for Mark, and I ran into Julie's dad online. This was back when Facebook was just it's 2010, 2011, I guess. So Facebook was, a thing. I'm like, oh, so I ran into her dad. Then I was like, oh, here's Julie, here's this. And then my sister said, hey, we ran into Julie over here. And then we decided, we were going to meet up for coffee. I was in a position in the program where I had that freedom to go out into Santa Barbara. So we met for coffee. Yeah. Kind of said, hey, this is where I'm at, with in my life. I'm in this program. I can't date anybody here in this program. It's against the rules. And she totally understood that. Yeah. So we remained friends. And then
was there a hope that once the program was over that you guys wanted to date, or was that kind of just off the table?
No. I don't think that it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well, we're going to wait 6 months and then we'll resume this conversation. Right. No, it wasn't that. It was more like she respected the position. Okay. So we would do things in a manner that wouldn't jeopardize each other, Gotcha. Like we'd go to church together, or we'd have phone conversations. And so we're able to get to know each other. And then, the whole idea of, relationships, and I'd been married a couple times, and just a lot of that sort of thing kind of came
and her
up.
Having Kylie, I mean, how old was Kylie at that point?
So she would have been 10 then. Okay. And I think she was 11 or 12. Well, we just had our 11th year anniversary, and Kylie just turned 23. So, it's just kind of one of those things where we're, and we were just laughing about this. I can't believe it's been 11 years.
Yeah.
One of those things where I kind of look at it and I go, man, I think, I've got Wayne and Ava and all of this stuff. And I just couldn't imagine my life without that. But I don't look back at my life and like miss the good old days, or I don't, pine for my past. I love where I am.
Right.
And I'm, really feel like this is where the Lord took my life, and why he did, I don't know. I can't answer that question. Why did he save me in that situation and not other people?
Right.
And
is that really an important thing to know, though, or is that something that eats at you? Like, do you really want to know the answer to that?
No, I don't. But I think that it's important to say, because there are other people that didn't make it. Yeah. And there's loved ones out there of people that didn't make it, and they might be hearing me say this type of thing, and they might have that question, and I don't have that answer. Right. But one thing that I will say is that it's God's mercy to give, and he will give it how he pleases. Yeah. We are not to second guess that or question that. Right. You go back to Gideon, for instance, and he's putting an army together for Gideon, and he goes, go have them lap water out of the thing like dogs. Yeah. Is it that simple? Yeah. Okay, send them away. Here's another test. Then he refines the army more and more and more, and he gets it down to 300 people. And it's now, does that make the people that lapped up water like dogs any less important? No. Right. He's trying to prove a point to Gideon. Listen, you don't need thousands and thousands. I'm going to get you down. And it's just, I hate to use the word arbitrary, but really, why? He could have said anything. Send them all over to a coconut tree, and the one that can climb up it backwards is going to be the one that's going to
right, absolutely
save you or whatever. It doesn't matter.
So I mean, that's like the whole, and this is where like the Calvinism thing comes in, right? Because where a Calvinist would say the reason he chose you is because you were elect from the foundations of the world or whatever. My view, and I don't even know what you would call it. I don't think it's straight Arminianist, but I would say that I think God saw your heart, even from a young child, and he already knew everything you were going to go through. He knew you were going to rebel. He knew you were going to go your own way. He knew you were going to get all involved in alcoholism. He knew you were going to come out of that. He knew when your time was that you were going to turn to him for help. Like, he knew all that already. Yeah. And that's why he did the things the way he did in your own life. And I think that's true about all of us. He also knows when he looks at somebody, whether maybe that person will never receive him. They'll never receive the truth because their heart doesn't want that, even if they don't realize that. So with those people, their lives might be orchestrated a certain way, or maybe they'll be used in some other way, right? Because I do think the Lord uses non-believers for what his glory, his purposes, right? Whatever that may be in that circumstance. So that's the way I would look at it, because the Lord has known you from before you were born. We know that, right? Scripture tells us that. So, I mean, it was the same with me. I mean, I grew up hating a big part of my young life was hating Christianity, hating Christians, hating the Bible, all of that stuff. But even back then when I was doing that, God knew that when I was 23, 24, somewhere around there, he was going to go bing, and a Calvinist would say, well, no, that's because God made you that way. It's like, well, yes and no. But then the question comes back to why? Right. That's really the question. That's the difference between Calvinists and Arminians, is that what's the why? Where the Calvinists will say, no, it has nothing to do with that person at all. It has nothing to do with their hearts, has nothing to do with their minds, has nothing to do with their soul. It just has strictly to do with God saying, you right there, I'm going to pull you out of the pit for no reason at all, just because I want to. Right. Where I would say, I think it's a heart condition. I think it goes back to the parable of the sower. Right. You have the same seed that's scattered on 4 different kinds of ground. I think each of those kinds of ground is different heart conditions. Yeah. But then the Calvinists would say, yes, but who made those different heart conditions? You see, it goes round and round and round and round.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Ryan, I was just talking to Julie about this the other day. We were talking about eschatology, especially now with everything that's going on with Israel and stuff. And, but one of the things that I brought up to her, I said, I think it's important that we understand that God, living outside of time, he's seen it all. Yeah. From beginning to end. Yeah. And there'll be no end, right? Because he's eternal, but he's seen humankind from beginning to end into glory. Right. It's already happened. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. I think that, it's just a matter of timing.
Yeah.
Yes. How is it that, I think that where I depart from Calvinism is in this idea that God created a great section of humanity to just go and be matchsticks.
Right.
In hell. I disagree with that. I think that completely militates against the character of God, and you just high level scripture. I mean, you could go to John 3:16, right? Mm-hmm. Simple language. Right. Okay. And he explains right there to Nicodemus throughout all of John 3.
Yep.
This is what a man must do to become saved. Well, then you go to Jonah.
Yeah.
No, Lord, I do not want to go, and I do not want to preach repentance to the Ninevites because I know you will save them.
Right.
And you are merciful and you are gracious, and I hate them. And I am going to, throw my sucker in the dirt, and I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are. And then you're going to go, and then you're going to preach, which he did. And then not, but we look at that. They took him seriously.
Yeah.
And I mean, even to the point where the animals were put into a posture of repentance. So why? Was it because of Jonah? Oh, it's because God already knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's the instrument from the beginning of time when Jesus gave the first command to set the firmament in motion. Mm-hmm. They knew.
Right.
Jesus knew then that he was going to have to come to the cross. He knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, and that's why when I apply that to things like evangelism, and I've met people that will say, if I don't talk to my family member about the Lord and they go to hell, that's my fault, they'll say, because I didn't talk to them. And I'd be like, well, no, I think you'll be held responsible if the Lord was truly leading you to talk to them and you said no, like you pulled a Jonah. And in this case, God didn't make you do it like he did Jonah, because he doesn't always make that person do it. But I'm like, he'll just use somebody else. He'll bring someone else, but you'll still have to answer for your disobedience, right? You're still going to have to stand before the Lord one day, and he's going to be like, hey, why didn't you talk to John? It's be like,
right. But I also think that could play a different way too. I mean, I think we can grow out of that. Mm-hmm. Situation. We could say, gosh, totally. You know what? I totally messed that one up, and repent from that. That's the whole thing about repentance, right? Mm-hmm. Repent from that way of thinking.
Right.
It shouldn't be, okay, well, what does that look like? Well, guess what? That's the entire book of Luke.
Right.
Up to that, it's repent. Change the way you think about these things,
Right.
And John's baptism of repentance. But Jesus threw out the whole thing.
Yeah.
Start thinking differently.
Right.
You're here. You need to be here.
Yeah.
The Beatitudes. What does that mean? It's start changing your thinking, man.
Yeah.
And then as it progresses and you get into chapters like 10, 11, 12, it's like, understand now the finger of God is upon you.
Right.
You need to understand this.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as we're going through it now in the Bible study, there's this escalation with Jesus. This is escalating the urgency in this. And it's this imminent danger, it's over your head, and so, I mean, all that to say, that's kind of where I ended up.
Yeah. So do you think though, that like the same, like we just used a scenario of somebody who the Lord is leading to witness, to evangelize, talk to somebody in their family or whatever the case is, and that person refusing for whatever reason, and you said they can grow through that, they'll learn. Obviously, we grow to know the Lord through those things, because like, oh, that you did want, or now I'm paying the consequence, whatever the case may be. But do you think there's instances on the flip side where we, for whatever reason, in our human effort, feel the need to go talk to somebody, or maybe we heard a motivational sermon about, oh, you guys need to get out there and preach the gospel. And for us to get out there, our human effort and put forth that, do you think in the same way we'll have to answer to God in that way? And he'll be like, what are you doing? Like, I didn't send you to do that. I didn't lead you to do that. Some motivational speaker on a stage led you to do that, you know?
I don't know that it'd have to go that far, like into judgment. I think it would be almost immediate.
Yeah,
there's going to be
learning
some
opportunity.
It's going to be a learning opportunity. Okay. So, going back to Luke for the moment, you remember, and I forget if it was in chapter 8 or 9 or one of those, but the disciples are sitting there and they're pointing out to these other people. Hey, look at them. They're over there casting out demons in your name, totally paraphrasing, but they're not one of us. Should we rain down fire on them or whatever? And Jesus is basically like, no,
right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Basically God's going to be glorified regardless.
Right.
So it's kind of this we, they, siege mentality, right? And that's what we need to get away from. It's like, just because I'm not a street evangelist doesn't mean that street evangelism is bad,
right,
or evil or worthless. No, quite the opposite. There's different people with different skill sets and talents to do that the Lord spoke to one day and said, you know what? Here's an opportunity for you to maybe use your experience, and start talking. But I can tell you that those people, they're gifted.
Yeah.
And I think that gifting directly comes from the Lord. Because if I was to sit there and go, oh gosh, you know what? Today I've got to go and talk to 12 people about the gospel, and I make it this mechanical sort of effort. Nothing's ever going to come of that.
Right.
In my opinion, anyway, because
But you learn there too. And I know for me, what I've learned through that is that it has to be all the Lord, but it doesn't matter, because all that matters is God's glory and what God's going to do. My job is just to do the best of my ability to follow him and to serve him and to do the things that he wants me to do. Now, I'm going to be wrong sometimes. I'm going to think, oh, God wants me to do this. And I've had that before too. Oh, I know God wants me to do this or talk to this person. Who Lee Strobel is.
Yes.
So he has a story he tells. In fact, he just told it again. I just saw him live down in LA with at Laura's church. They had a conference down there, and he told the story again, but he tells a story, and you may have heard the story from him, but where he says that it's kind of the same situation where he's like, oh man, this guy, the Lord wants me to talk to this guy. I'm so ready to talk to this guy. I'm going to invite him to church, and he's going to come to church. He's going to get saved. It's going to be awesome. The Lord's really put this on my heart, right? So he goes in there and he starts talking to the guy, and the guy just wants nothing to do with it. And he's like, oh no, we're having this church service tonight. It's great for non-believers to come. We're gonna be talking about stuff. Please come. And the guy's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm done. I don't want anything to do with this crap Christianity stuff. Get out of my face, right? And Lee Strobel's just dejected. And he's like me. He's like, he's mad at the Lord. He's like, what in the world is this all about? So then years go by, right? And he's totally bitter about it. And now Lee Strobel's like this big speaker. So he's at a church speaking. And this guy comes up to him after the service, and he goes, hi, my name's so-and-so. I just wanted to introduce myself to you. And I just want you to know something. He goes, about 10 years ago, he goes, I'm a plumber. And about 10 years ago, I was under a sink fixing a pipe. And I heard you talking to this friend of yours about going to a church service that night. He goes, I wasn't a believer, but I heard you talking about this church service, and it was going to be this night, and you were presenting all these great arguments about why he should go. He goes, I just want to tell you, I showed up that night, and I got saved that night. And I've been following the Lord ever since.
That's right? Cool.
So 10 years later, Lee Strobel finds out, oh my gosh, yes, the Lord did lead me to talk to that guy, but it wasn't for that guy. It was for the guy on the floor that you didn't even know was there.
Right.
I'm saying? It's just, I love the way the Lord works sometimes,
Yeah. And I think at the core of it, Ryan, that is why I've adopted sort of that stance on my past. I don't need to understand. I don't need to know.
Right.
Because I think it'd be awfully arrogant of me to think that, hey, the Lord saved me because of me. Well, that may be true in some sense. Maybe there's an attribute or some personality thing or a position.
Right.
Now, but when I look at the children that I have, when I look at the circumstances that brought them into my life, that starts to make sense to me. Why, that happened while I was in a position with this woman to get these children. And is that it? No, I don't know. But I prefer to think that there's a person or a circumstance or something out there, just like you were saying. It could just be a third party conversation you're having with somebody, and somebody overhearing it, that you're having an influence in that particular circumstance.
Right.
So I think, I remember one of the things that I've been convicted on over the years, since, getting sober and going through the mission, is who am I to get in the way of somebody?
Right.
If you want to have a conversation about God, I will have a conversation with you about God.
Right.
But I need to listen. I need to not interject my opinion based, just solely on my understanding of things.
Right.
So that's a big deal, I think. And I think a lot of people, myself included, I mean, I'm not saying I've always been perfect in that sense, but I've been convicted of that. It's like, who are you? Who are you to, speak on my behalf, your opinion? Keep it simple, and the gospel is a simple thing. And I think for me, we were talking about this the other week in Bible study. It's like eschatology, dispensationalism, all of these different things. They're all neat conversations to have, but are they relevant to the big picture of things? I don't think they are. I think that they can be sticking points. If they become detrimental to somebody understanding the gospel, then we're going to have an issue. Meaning, if you want to have a particular view on the book of Revelation that is just kind of not really, it's been disproven, or it's kind of like, it's kind of fringe stuff, sort of weird. And it becomes a distraction to a person, that maybe should be understanding the cross first. But now they're over here. They're in the weeds over here. Well, okay, I read my Bible, but I only read Daniel, Isaiah, and Revelation.
Right.
And it's like, well, man, now you got to go back and learn how you can avoid all this stuff.
Yeah.
What's your hang up here?
Right.
On what did Jesus say? Just I hold to this, and I think you do too. And I've heard this testimony several times. Alistair Begg, as a matter of fact, is one that he talks about this often. You talk about third-party conversations. He'll be preaching something, or he'll go drop off a book for something, and it was a parishioner, a woman. And he wanted to drop a book off, and it was really, she wanted to be, I forget if it was to be more equipped to talk to her husband or somebody like that. And he goes, the man ends up at church and ends up becoming saved. And it wasn't because of me. It was because the word of God is a living mechanism.
Right.
It has that power to transform people. And I go back to that because I remember the first time I read through the entire New Testament. This was years and years before I, had my experience with sobriety. I read through the New Testament, and I remember it was very apparent throughout the entire thing that Jesus Christ is the central figure of the entire New Testament.
Yeah. I would argue also the Old Testament.
Yeah, but specifically the New Testament, and there's a reason I'm just bringing that up, because most people say, "Yeah, I've read the New Testament,"
right?
Or at least they've read enough of the Gospels and a few of the epistles, and maybe Revelation. They might skip Jude and some of these smaller works, but now go back through it years later and read it again, and now this is where, oddly enough, other questions start coming up. Well, what did he mean by saying this? What does this mean? And what does this mean? And I think that's just the process of the Lord just working in people's lives. It's like, you don't have to understand something. And, I would even say you don't even have to have a perfect faith, right? You just have to it's not about you. It's
Right.
about, it's not your amount of faith or the perfection of your faith. It's the
Right.
object of your faith.
Sure.
So, and I think that holds great weight in, and I also think, Ryan, that most people really make these decisions in what I would maybe call the dark.
Yeah.
Alone. Just you and the Lord. That's when decisions are made.
Right.
So they may come out the next morning and be the same sort of person, but slowly things are starting to change in them. They might have a differing opinion on language.
Right.
Different
so
opinion.
what would you say to some, like, what, for lack of a better, well, not lack of a better term, but this can be taken many different ways. Like, what gospel would you preach if a non-believer, let's say somebody you work with or somebody you know, but you know is a non-believer, were to ask you, hey, Ian, tell me about your, this is probably the way they would word it, right? Tell me about your religion. I'm looking for something. I'm feeling empty in my life, and I'm looking for something. And I just want you to tell me about your God and your religion. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it isn't. I think there would need to be more of a conversation. I think I'd want to understand what's your philosophy. What is your understanding of things?
Okay.
Where's your God? Mm-hmm. What God are you in the pantheon of gods? Which is the one that you adhere to? Are you self-driven? Are you these things? Because then I think, and he models this well, that's when Paul can come in and say, well, let me tell you about the unknown God.
Right.
And I think that is where, if we are tactful, respectful, and we understand and can be grace-filled in those situations, that's going to go way farther.
Yeah.
Than just trying to sit there, well, yeah, I'll tell you, you sinner, and wag your finger at them and speak sternly and bludgeon somebody over the head.
So you wouldn't have some kind of like program or some kind of like sales pitch. You would want to get to know them a little better first.
Goodness, no, man.
Okay.
I'd be a street evangelist if I could do that.
Right.
I don't. I want to know.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's sort of like, well, should I take the truck or should I take the car? Well, I don't know. Is it snowing outside? Maybe take the car or truck.
Well, let's say that they just kind of had a generic response to that. They say, if you said, well, where are you at? What do you know about God, or who is your God, or whatever? And they just said, Ian, I don't know. All I know is that I have this emptiness inside me. I've been trying to do these things. Maybe they say, I've never really believed in any God. I've kind of been an atheist my whole life. I don't know anything about any religions at all, but I just know, Ian, that you are a follower of Christ. Let's say I see a fish sticker on a Jesus fish on your car. So, or somebody told me that you're a churchgoer. Mm-hmm. I just want you to share with me like what you have in your life. Yeah. And then I want to see if maybe that's something that I can have also, or if I want to have that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a different conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because they've already sort of, so what's prompting that,
Well, right.
Why are you curious now?
Yeah.
I said, because let me tell you about my life.
Okay.
And this is where I was. Are you feeling, this is the interesting thing about having conversations with people when you have, especially in like my line of work, when you can create what they call like tactical empathy.
Yeah.
You're listening. You're truly trying to understand where they're coming from.
Right.
Not to weaponize it, but you're giving them an answer.
Yeah.
So they're telling you, and they're going to tell you a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And for instance, I would probably feel that I would need to share where I had used to be.
Right.
And how I came out of it.
So you'd give kind of a testimonial.
I would.
Okay.
I would. And because I think that that's one of the main reasons that the Lord gives us those experiences. Mm-hmm. And, if I was to read chapter and verse to a person like that, I'd lose them.
Yeah.
Potentially. And I'd be like, well, here, just go read John.
Right.
Right.
Or, hey, I'll pray for you. All not bad things, but it's just like, listen, this person's in front of you. They have a very real need right now. How do you meet them in that need?
Mm-hmm.
And what do they need ultimately? Do they need to hear my entire testimony? No, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to hear the, bits and pieces? And I think at that point, that's where the Lord is going to work.
Yeah.
He's going to call things up, and he's going to say, well, let's talk about this. Maybe they have a loved one that's really struggling in addiction. That's happened to me.
Sure.
Where people have come up to me and they say, I don't know why, but I feel like I need to talk to you. Here's my son's situation.
Yep.
And, I said, I'm going to tell you something. And this is truly what was put on my heart. I said, I'm going to tell you something, and this is maybe the last thing that you need to hear from me, but I want to encourage you. You need to continue to pray for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks later, that person they were, because I knew the person they were talking about, walked into the rescue mission.
Oh, okay.
And that was the whole thing. They were caught in addiction and stuff. I'm like, hey, what's up, buddy? And hey, I met your mom, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, crazy. Yeah. And I said, I'm glad you're here. So I don't know, Ryan. I think for me, when you ask a question like that, I kind of go into overthinking mode. Yeah. Again, I try to have it just be a little bit more organic. Why are you asking these things? Do you have an experience, or with a self-realization, throw it to the universe type stuff? And are you feeling like a failure? Where are you on your road to things?
And I'm with you. I think that's extremely important to kind of probe a little bit and find out where they're coming from. But to go to what you just said, I think that's exactly the way the Lord works with, like you said, if people may feel the need to talk to you about addiction or about those kinds of things, because you have experience with that, and you can look at it and say, well, that could very well be the reason why the Lord had you go through some of those things, because now you're equipped, right? Like for me, it's anxiety and panic, that kind of thing that I've dealt with my whole life.
Right.
And as soon as I kind of went down that road and when I got really bad to the point that I actually got some help, and then I was, learning things that I never knew before about it. And I still struggle with it today, of course, but I'm much better than I was. But it was amazing after all of that and kind of the transformation that I went through in getting through a lot of that, how many people that I don't even necessarily know, like I might be training somebody for work, and they'll just mention something. Oh yeah. And I've had panic disorder for what? And I'm like, I mean, it was amazing. Like I'd never heard that before, like people just saying that. And then I started getting all these people that would say that, and I'd be like, really? He's like, well, I went through that too. And then it would open this huge conversation where we'd be sharing. And sometimes if it's a non-believer, obviously I'm going to bring the Lord into that, because I look at my healing through all that as definitely the Lord, so it just opened up all these doors, but when we're going through those things, we're not thinking about that. We're thinking, this sucks. Like, God, get me out of this. This is terrible. But the Lord, knowing all he knows, is going, no, Ryan, I need you to get through this, and I'm going to get you through this, because on the other side of that, I'm going to use you. Right. Same with the Apostle Paul, who you mentioned a while back. Same thing, Why was he doing all that?
Well, and even in more modern times, we go back to that book, Tortured for Christ, Richard Wurmbrand, and he's like, he spent 12 total years in prison, 8 the first time, 4 the second time. Yeah. And, the second time around, though, what he said he experienced is that his former jailers were now fellow inmates. Mm-hmm. Because they had come, and all he did was pray and preach and pray and preach and pray. And he was willing to go back. He's like, no, I'm not going to stop. Right. I'm going to do this. And of course it got him. And then he was ransomed out and all of that. But, I think that it's just oftentimes, Ryan, I think when I hear, try to put a succinct answer together and put it into a box, and I think that that's where we go wrong. I think some people, they kind of want to go, what's your testimony in 20 seconds or whatever. Yeah. Well, I would imagine that everybody's 20-second testimony is going to be the same. Yeah. Jesus saved me. Right. I hope that would be right. Okay. How long did that take? Okay. Well, hey, I was a degenerate addict and blah, blah, blah. And then Jesus saved me.
Right.
Oh, intriguing. Well, I don't know. I mean, but I do think, and you've had experience with this, is that, because you're talking to people that have a relevant experience to you. And so you automatically have an empathy.
Yes.
You have a connection, and that's why, like, when I was studying counseling and stuff, I'm like, I would probably be very fit to do addiction counseling, things like that. That is my background, my experience.
Right.
I've been counseled. I know the struggles, and addiction is addiction to me. There's always a root cause. However, would I be fit to be like a sexual assault counselor or a rape counselor? I'm like, heck no.
Right.
Number one, I don't know anything about it.
Right.
I just wouldn't have any sort of foundational experience to have an empathy with people. Now, some may argue, hey, well, the Lord can give you those tools to deal with a person in that situation. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But is that a vocation that I would choose for myself? No. Could the Lord choose that vocation for me and then have me go into it and be completely uncomfortable? And then all of a sudden I come out, 15 years later thinking, boy, that really started out bad, but man, this is such a rewarding field.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't want to discount it, because who knows?
Right.
Maybe he would, but would it be, so I think from a fundamental understanding of myself, I'm like, I'm not cut out for that.
Yeah.
Well,
that's good. That's good to come to that realization,
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, that was one of the big things that came out of recovery and still continue to be. I think recovery is one of those things that isn't a one and done. I think it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to understand, because I've heard too many times people say, I used to be a real bad alcoholic, but I'm okay now. I can go watch the football game at the bar.
Yeah.
I would be like, well, why do you feel that you need to go to a bar to watch a football game? What else?
There's TVs lacking? Other places.
Yeah. What's lacking in your life where you feel that you really need to have that? Is it the camaraderie? Is it the smell of the beer? Is it this? I don't know.
Yeah.
But for me, man, I'd be like, you know what? No, I don't. Why would I? Now, I made the statement earlier that I believe the Lord delivered me from alcohol.
Right.
And what's interesting to me is that, gosh, this is years ago. This was 9, maybe even 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I got really sick, like the flu. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm dying here. And I'm like, so I took some NyQuil. And it was, my sole motivation was, I just need to be unsick.
Right.
And I took this alcohol, or this NyQuil that is primarily, the main ingredient is alcohol.
Right.
Dude, it jacked me up. I mean, I'll never take it again.
Like in
ever.
What way?
So
did it trigger you? Like, did it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I have in my alcoholism, it's kind of rare. There's not too many, even Randy, like if you were to talk to Randy about it, there's not a lot of people like me that live. It was, I don't even, or come out of it unscathed.
Right.
Most people like me will have wet brain or some weird stuff like that. It's like this constant drink. But what it comes down to in the scientific terms is that you have an allergic reaction. Your body is allergic to alcohol.
Right.
So it's gonna cause a physiological effect in your body.
Yeah.
That wouldn't, like anybody, you take NyQuil, it's like you're fine. You just get drowsy, you fall asleep. Well, I got drowsy, fell asleep, and then just had some of the worst dreams. It was terrible. And to the point where I'm like, oh, that was a mistake. I'll never do that again. Mm. So I'm very careful. Like even an accidental ingestion of like alcohol, it isn't going to like trigger me into wanting to be like, go back out and,
Right.
But it has a real physical effect on me.
Okay.
Far, just sort of coupled with a psychological side of addiction, so to speak. So my point in that is the Lord delivered me from the physical. I just need to be aware, or the mental. I just need to be aware of the physical and not tempt fate to the point where, yeah, it's fine. I'll just have, one. I hear it all the time, man. People think, oh, I can do that. And I'm like, you're better than me. I can't do that. So I don't even tempt it.
Yeah. Smart. Yeah. That's smart, man. So, all right, dude. That's it.
All right.
This is going to be, I think, the longest episode thus far.
Really?
Yeah. We've been going for 4 hours and 10 minutes?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty long. I think the longest before, I might be wrong. There might be one that's a little bit longer or close to. But yeah, but it's fun, man. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be long because you and I are talkers and we like to, shoot.
Yeah, and I that's why I try to stay focused on a topic.
All right.
Because it's and that's why I catch the rabbit trails. It's no, it's not even worth bringing up because just, we could go down them and but no, I enjoyed it. I'm happy to be on and
fun stuff, man. Well, I've been trying to get this going since season 1, remember, but it just never worked out. So
yeah, well, I know. And like I said, I've listened to them as I can, and I think the last one did have a chance was Mayberry's.
Oh yeah, that was fun. That was a fun one.
I love. And I didn't even bring up classical music or anything like that.
Oh no.
Here today because I'm I'm into that stuff too, man. Or throat singing, any of that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm just kind of a musical type person. I like.
Yeah. I am too.
And
so people say, well, Ryan, what's your favorite genre of music? I say good.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Is it good?
Yeah. I don't care if it's death metal or country or classical or hip hop. If it's good, I like it, So
yeah.
But all right, man. Well, you have a fantastic Thanksgiving and
you too.
I'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.
All right, man.
All right.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at whycan'twetalkaboutthat@proton.me. And if you haven't yet, please join the Why Can't We Talk About That podcast Facebook group. Please leave a review wherever you're listening to this from. That will help more people find the podcast. Thank you. Here's a clip from the next episode.
And then me and Emily didn't work out. I went and sowed my wild oats. Backslid a ton. That's what you call it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I was saved. I would say no back then.
Right.
And then it just got to a point where I hit rock bottom, and then reached out and I said a prayer one night and I said, God, if you're real, which I knew He was.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And also in that prayer I said, if I haven't gone too far, if I'm still able to be saved.
Right. Because you believed you could get to a point where it was impossible.
Yeah. Wow. I thought maybe it was man, I've done so much.
Right.
I didn't understand the grace part of it.
Right.
It was more of I have to assist in my own salvation.
Yeah.
I have to do something to help Him out.
Yeah. If you don't hold up your end of the bargain, then you're out the door.
Sure.
Right.